The Shirokin homeworld is a breathtaking planet, classified as a Class 3 world, an oasis of harmony, where every aspect of the environment coexists in perfect balance. Their planet is a wonder, sprawling bioluminescent forests that glow softly in the twilight, towering trees with leaves like stained glass, filtering violet light onto mossy ground. The rivers are calm, winding through the valleys like ribbons of silver, no sudden currents, just a peaceful flow. The air is thick with the scent of alien flora, and at night, the sky is filled with constellations, as if the stars themselves are watching over them. The Shirokin evolved in this gentle cradle. No predators ever hunted them, so their intellect was their strength. They built cities that hovered above the rivers, connected by glass bridges, and their knowledge of physics, chemistry, and star mapping was unmatched. They were never a military species. Violence never entered their culture, but they stood at the edge of the universe, driven by curiosity. The Shirokin people, though small in stature, averaging about 3 feet tall, are immense in their mental capacity. For centuries, they were content to observe, study, and catalog the cosmos. But as the Voltra began their surprise attacks on Council systems, the Shirokin couldn't stay silent. They became the Council's eyes and ears, sending scouts not as soldiers, but as observers, seeking weaknesses, vulnerabilities in the Voltra fleet. Each scout, including Vireth, carried not weapons, but a hunger for knowledge. They fed the Council with data, tactical layouts, engine schematics, even communications frequencies, giving the Council a fighting chance to outsmart the Voltra. And yet, despite their brilliance, the Shirokin never sought glory. They were driven by a quiet duty to protect not just their own species, but every culture in the Council. So, as the war escalated, the Shirokin found themselves walking a fine line, no longer just scientists, but critical players in a galactic struggle, holding fast to their ideals as the universe spun toward chaos. As the war raged on, the Galactic Council found itself on the brink of collapse. The Voltra, with their aggressive, coordinated strikes, began to dismantle Council defenses. Battles raged across outer systems, trade routes were cut, and entire colonies fell one by one. It wasn't just a failure of military might, it was a failure of coordination. The Council species, diverse as they were, couldn't unite fast enough. And so, to understand that failure, you need to know the 15 races of the Council. They moved to the Council. And now, as the Voltra press, the unity of these 15 races is all that stands between survival and destruction. The Shirokin, despite being one of the smallest races in stature, were a linchpin in this delicate web. They brought unparalleled scientific insight, and their data, their analysis, was the linchpin that the Council desperately needed. Without their precision and their dedication, the Council would have crumbled far sooner, and still, they cling to their hope, hoping their knowledge might yet save them all. Vireth, the captain of the Shirokin scout ship, stands just over 3 feet tall, slender with a smooth, silvery skin that almost mirrors the forest glow of their homeworld. His large, luminous eyes, adapted to low light, scan the console with a calm focus. Beside him, his pilot Terrell is a quick, agile thinker, with soft, moss-green skin and a voice like a gentle stream. Terrell navigates the ship through the star charts, a natural pilot who moves with grace even in the chaos of flight. The third crew member, Sela, is a biologist, a gentle, introspective researcher, with dark blue skin and patterns like constellations across her arms. She cares for the ship's biosensors, making sure every scan is precise. The fourth, Rena, is a communications specialist. Her fingers dance over the console as she decodes signals. Together, these four Shirokin form a tight-knit crew, bound by intellect and trust. As they move through the vast, silent spaces, every calculation, every scan is a link in a chain, one that, if broken, might doom them all. And so, as the ship glides forward, their discovery of a Voltra weakness becomes not just a mission, but the last hope for the Council's survival. The Shirokin didn't find an obvious flaw. They noticed a tiny, irregular delay in the Voltra power cycle, something just outside the Voltra's usual detection range. It was almost hidden in noise, just a slight lag between their core discharge and recharge. And by carefully mapping this small timing offset, the Shirokin realized they could exploit it with a precisely tuned pulse, no simple brute force, but a delicate interference. They knew the risk, and they knew that if even a fraction of a second was off, the Voltra would adapt. But this subtle vulnerability, so difficult to detect, became their one chance, small, precise, and quietly powerful, if only they could get the message back to the Council in time. The Shirokin scout ship slipped carefully along the edge of a narrow asteroid belt, using the tumbling rocks as cover, their small, agile craft weaving between fragments, each move calculated, each turn silent. To their left, vast Voltra warships loomed, silent hunters patrolling the gap, their dark hulls absorbing the starlight. To their right, a void stretched out, black clouds shifting in slow, unnatural rhythms. It was the quarantine zone, a dead space that no ship crossed, an ancient boundary whispered about in old council tales. For thousands of years, it was a graveyard of ships, and an ancient enemy was said to lie within, a forgotten race so devastating that no one dared enter. And as Vireth's crew guided the ship along the narrow corridor of rock, every heartbeat was a battle between hope and fear, because just a few kilometers further, if they slipped too far, they would cross that line, and no one knew what waited inside. The asteroid belt moved like a river of broken moons. Vireth watched it through the forward display, his large luminous eyes reflecting fragments of stone, dust, and distant starlight. The scout ship slipped between the tumbling rocks with careful grace, its silver hull barely visible against the cold darkness. Every correction from the maneuvering thrusters was soft, controlled, almost breathless. The vessel had been built for silence, not speed. For observation, not war. That had always been the Shirokin way. But now silence was survival. Distance to Voltra patrol line. Vireth asked. Terrell's slender fingers moved across the pilot's console. The soft green of his skin looked pale beneath the blue glow of the instruments. 14,000 kilometers and closing, Terrell said quietly. They are maintaining a wide sweep pattern. 3 destroyers, possibly more beyond sensor range. Rena turned from the communication station. Her hands hovered above the controls but did not touch them. There was nothing to send, not yet. Any transmission, even a tight beam burst, could betray them. Their scan pulses are increasing, she said. They know something passed this way. Sela stood near the biosensor array, though there was no biology to scan out here, only stone and radiation and the cold machinery of war. Her dark blue skin shimmered faintly with constellation-like markings as the alarm lights pulsed across her face. The asteroid density is thinning ahead, she said. If we continue this course, we will lose cover within 9 minutes. Vireth did not answer immediately. On the left side of the display, the Voltra fleet waited like a wall of black metal. Even at this distance, their ships looked predatory, hard angles, heavy armor, engines burning a dull crimson beneath their hulls. They did not move with elegance. They moved with purpose. like blades dragged slowly across glass. On the right, the quarantine zone stretched into impossible darkness. It did not look like a border. There was no wall, no beacon line, no visible net of mines or warning buoys. Just space stars, distant systems glittering as if nothing terrible had ever happened there. But the story said otherwise. Every child of the council knew the old warnings. Do not cross the dark boundary. Do not answer signals from beyond it. Do not follow lights into the dead sectors. Thousands of years ago, before the records became fragments and myth, something had come from that region. Something powerful enough to burn fleets, shatter colonies, and bring the early council to the edge of extinction. The details had been lost, buried, or deliberately erased. The names had changed from species to species, translated into 100 fearful shapes. The Devourers, the Iron Ghosts, the Deathworlders, the enemy beyond the line. Whatever they had been, the Council had survived only by sealing off nearly 15% of the galaxy and declaring it forbidden. No exploration, no trade, no rescue missions, no exceptions. Ships that entered never returned. Vireth had never believed every tale. He was Shirokin. His people trusted data, not superstition. But even among scientists, some warnings became instinct. And now his ship was flying with that forbidden dark less than a few kilometers to starboard. "Captain," Terrell said, voice tightening. "One destroyer is changing course." Vireth's focus snapped back to the left display. A Voltra destroyer broke from the patrol line. Then a second. Then a third. They turned with terrible precision, their engines flaring brighter as they angled toward the asteroid belt. Rena inhaled sharply. "They detected us." "Not fully," Vireth said, though he did not know if that was hope or truth. "Terrell, keep us inside the belt. Reduce thermal output another 3%. If I reduce further, we lose maneuvering response. Do it." Terrell obeyed. The scout ship dimmed. Power flowed away from non-essential systems. The soft hum beneath the deck weakened until the bridge felt almost hollow. Lights lowered. Displays thinned to pale outlines. For one fragile moment, the ship seemed less like a vessel and more like a held breath drifting between stones. The first Voltra scan wave swept across the belt. The bridge trembled. Not from impact, from energy passing through them. Sela's console flickered. "They are using deep spectrum detection, not standard patrol sensors." "They know the data was taken," Rena whispered. Vireth looked toward the sealed data core at the center of the bridge. Inside it were the scan records, the tiny delay in the Voltra power cycle, the almost invisible lag between discharge and recharge. Not a weakness any soldier would have noticed. Not a flaw a weapon would have revealed. But the Shirokin had seen it. A hesitation, a stutter, a fraction of time, where the Voltra's greatest machines became vulnerable to interference. If the Council received the data, they might be able to build a countermeasure. If they did not, the Voltra planet killers would continue moving from system to system, breaking colonies like glass. Vireth straightened. "Prepare for evasive pattern cell I3. Terrell looked back at him. "Captain, that pattern was designed for debris storms, not warships." "I know." The destroyers entered weapons range. The first shot came without warning. A beam of red-white energy tore through the asteroid field, carving a glowing scar across a tumbling rock the size of a city tower. The asteroid split apart, molten fragments spinning outward in a storm of fire and vapor. Terrell moved before Vireth gave the order. The scout ship Dove. A slab of stone rushed past the viewport, close enough that its shadow swallowed the bridge. The ship rolled beneath it, slid through a narrow gap, and burst into a pocket of open space just as another Voltra shot cut through the place they had been. Alarm screamed. Port stabilizer overloaded. Sela called. Reroute through secondary channels, Vireth said. Already trying. The second destroyer opened fire. This time the beam did not aim for the ship. It aimed for the asteroids around them. 3 rocks exploded in sequence, turning the corridor ahead into a storm of shrapnel. The scout ship was too small, too lightly shielded. Even fragments could tear them open. Terrell. I see it. The pilot threw the ship into a sharp climb. The inertial dampeners struggled, and for a moment Vireth felt his body pull hard against the restraints. The bridge tilted. Rena grabbed the edge of her console. Sela dropped to one knee, still working as her display flashed warning after warning. A shard struck the lower hull. The sound rang through the ship like a bell being cracked. Hull breach on deck 2. Sela shouted. Emergency seals holding. Engines? Vireth asked. Functional, but stress is climbing. The third destroyer moved to cut off their path. Vireth saw the trap forming. 1 destroyer behind. 1 to port. 1 ahead, forcing them toward the right. Toward the quarantine zone. The Voltra were not merely chasing them. They were hurting them. Rena's voice shook. Captain, they are pushing us across the boundary. Vireth's eyes narrowed. The Voltra knew the stories too. Maybe they believed the Shirokin would rather surrender than cross. Maybe they wanted the data destroyed without risking retrieval. Maybe to them, the quarantine zone was as good as death. Another blast struck. The ship lurched violently. This time the lights went out. For 2 seconds, the bridge was dark except for the glow of emergency indicators and the terrified reflection in Vireth's eyes. Then red backup lighting filled the room. Terrell's voice came sharp and strained. Main ion drive is failing. Vireth moved to his command console. Status. Sela scanned the damage, her hands trembling now. Primary drive coils ruptured. Navigation array damaged. Long-range communications offline. Phase calculations unstable. Rena turned to him. We cannot outrun them. Nobody spoke after that. The truth sat among them like a 5th crew member. They could not fight. They could not flee. They could not call for help. And the data could not be allowed to die here. A Voltra destroyer appeared in the forward display, its dark hull filling the space between the asteroids. Weapon ports opened along its underside, glowing like angry eyes. Terrell whispered, Captain. Vireth looked at the navigation display. Most of it was gone. Their star map flickered in broken fragments. Coordinates jumped and vanished. The ship no longer knew exactly where it was. The phase drive still had power, but without navigation, any jump would be blind. A blind phase jump was not a maneuver. It was a prayer. They could emerge inside a star. Inside a planet. In deep space with no way home. They could tear themselves apart in fold shear. They could vanish forever. Or they could survive. Vireth placed one hand over the data core. Prepare phase jump. Terrell stared at him. Captain, we have no coordinates. I know. Navigation is shattered. The phase envelope could collapse. I know. Sela stood slowly. Vireth, he looked at them, one by one. Terrell, who had flown them through impossible corridors. Sela, who had kept the ship alive with calm hands and quiet brilliance. Rena, who had guarded every signal and every word as if language itself could save them. His crew. His friends. I will not order you into this without hearing your voices, Vireth said softly. But if we remain, the Voltra take the data. If they take the data, the Council loses its chance. Rena swallowed hard. Then she nodded. Sela closed her eyes for one brief moment, then returned to her console. Phase core is damaged but responsive. Terrell turned back to the controls. His hands steadied. Blind jump charging. The Voltra destroyer fired. Terrell rolled the ship hard. The beam missed the bridge by meters, slicing across the upper hull. A section of the sensor mast vanished in a burst of molten metal and frozen vapor. Phase charge at 40%. Sela shouted. Another impact hit the stern. The ship screamed. Not like metal. Like something alive. 60%. The quarantine zone filled the right side of the display. The boundary was no longer beside them. It was ahead. Black clouds shifted beyond the invisible line, slow and vast, threaded with faint pulses of light that did not match any known stellar phenomenon. The Voltra had them boxed in. 80%. Rena gripped her console with both hands. Captain, if we jump now, the damaged navigation may pull us toward the nearest gravitational shadow. Can you compensate? No. Vireth looked at the forward display. The destroyer's weapon ports brightened again. Then we trust the universe to be kinder than the Voltra. For the first time since the chase began, Terrell almost smiled. Phase charge complete. Vireth took one final breath. Jump. Terrell struck the control. Space broke. The stars ahead stretched into thin white lines, then twisted sideways, as if the entire galaxy had been caught in invisible hands and wrung like cloth. The asteroid belt vanished. The Voltra destroyers became smears of red light. The bridge shook so violently that Rena cried out. The phase drive howled. The sound rose through the deck, through the consoles, through bone and blood and thought. Vireth felt himself pulled in every direction at once. For one impossible instant, he saw the ship from outside itself, a tiny silver shape folding into a wound of light, carrying 4 fragile lives and the last hope of the Council into the unknown. Then everything went white. Then black. Then silence. The scout ship fell out of phase space like a stone dropped into an endless ocean. Systems failed one after another. The main display cracked. The lights flickered. Atmosphere vented from somewhere behind them in a thin, hissing stream. Emergency foam sealed a rupture near the rear bulkhead. The deck tilted beneath Vireth's feet. No one moved at first. Then Terrell coughed. Sela groaned softly. Rena whispered, "Are we alive?" Vireth opened his eyes. The forward display slowly cleared. Outside was darkness. Not empty space. Not normal space. Darkness with shape. Black clouds drifted across the stars in slow, unnatural currents. Lightning flickered silently within them, distant and pale. The stars themselves looked wrong, dimmed, scattered, half hidden behind veils of shadow. The navigation system tried to identify their location. It failed. Tried again, failed. Then one warning appeared across the broken display in red Shirokin script. Restricted region confirmed. A second line followed. Quarantine zone. No one spoke. The scout ship drifted helplessly in forbidden space, engines dead, hull wounded, surrounded by the ancient dark. And somewhere beyond the black clouds, something waited. The warning remained frozen on the shattered forward display. Restricted region confirmed. Quarantine zone. No one on the bridge spoke. The words glowed in red Shirokin script, flickering in and out as damaged circuits struggled to maintain the display. Every few seconds, the message distorted, broke apart into fragments, and then reassembled itself again, as if even the ship's own systems could not believe what they were reporting. Vireth stared at it, unable to breathe. The quarantine zone. For thousands of years, that phrase had carried weight far beyond law. It was not merely forbidden space. It was not simply a border. It was a wound in the galaxy, a scar left behind by a war so ancient that truth had rotted into myth. Every species in the Galactic Council had stories about it. Some called it the Dead Reach. Some called it the Ashen Expanse. The Shirokin, in their gentle way, had always called it Voltra, the silence beyond. No one entered Voltra. No one returned from it. And now they were inside it. The scout ship drifted powerless through the black. Around them, the stars were dim and strange, partially hidden behind vast drifting clouds that moved too slowly to be natural. They rolled across space like smoke from a fire no one could see, deep black against the already endless dark. Within the clouds, faint lightning flickered without sound, branching in pale blue-white veins that illuminated nothing for more than a heartbeat. It made the darkness worse. The bridge smelled of burned insulation, leaking coolant and hot metal. Emergency lights pulsed a dull red across the walls. Somewhere aft, a damaged stabilizer knocked against its housing in a steady, hollow rhythm. Thud, thud, thud. Like the ship had grown a second heartbeat. Terrell was the first to move. The pilot lifted his head from the edge of his console, blinking through the haze. A thin line of violet blood ran from a cut above one of his large eyes. He wiped it away with the back of his hand and looked at his controls. "Engines are gone," he said. His voice was quiet. "Not panicked, not yet. Main ion drive destroyed. Maneuvering thrusters at 12%. Phase drive is burned out. I'm not sure I could light it again without tearing us apart." Sela pushed herself upright near the biosensor station. One of the overhead panels had come loose during the jump and struck the floor beside her. She touched the side of her head, winced, then checked her fingers. "I'm alive," she said before anyone asked. "Bruised. Nothing broken." Rena gave a weak laugh from the communications station. "That is the most optimistic damage report I've ever heard." Then she looked at her own console, and the small smile vanished. "Long-range communications are gone. Short-range may still function if I can bypass the burned array." Vireth forced himself to stand fully upright. His body ached from the blind phase jump. Every muscle felt pulled, stretched wrong, as if some part of him had not arrived at exactly the same time as the rest. His hands trembled, and he curled his fingers into fists to hide it from the others. He was the captain. He could be afraid, but he could not let fear command the bridge. "Life support?" he asked. Sela turned back to her station. "Functional but unstable. We are losing atmosphere from 2 minor hull fractures. Emergency foam sealed the worst of it, but the sealant will not hold indefinitely. Power reserves are dropping." "How long?" Sela hesitated. That hesitation told Vireth more than the answer. "6 hours," she said. "Maybe 8 if we shut down everything but life support and the data core." The data core. All 4 of them looked toward it. The small armored cylinder sat locked in its cradle at the center of the bridge, untouched by the chaos around it. Inside was the Voltra weakness. The tiny, irregular delay in their power cycle. The subtle timing offset between discharge and recharge. the delicate interference pattern that could give the Galactic Council a way to resist the planet killers. The core had survived, for now. Vireth placed one hand on the cradle, steadying himself. "We are not dead," he said. Rena looked toward the forward display, where the black clouds shifted across the stars. "Not yet." No one corrected her. Outside, the scout ship slowly turned, powerless except for the faint sputter of emergency attitude jets. Pieces of its own hull drifted nearby, silver shards, broken sensor fins, flakes of frozen coolant glittering like tiny blue crystals in the dark. One fragment rotated past the forward screen, close enough that Vireth could see his own damaged ship reflected in its twisted surface. The Starseeker no longer looked elegant. She looked wounded. The Shirokin scout ship had been built for graceful silence. Smooth silver hull plating, narrow sensor vanes, a curved forward body meant to gather data from distant systems with almost surgical precision. She was small, beautiful, and delicate, the product of a people who believed the universe was something to be studied, not conquered. Now one side of her hull was scorched black. Her sensor mast had been sheared away. The port stabilizer was bent inward, trailing vapor in slow, pulsing breaths. The engine housing glowed faintly, where internal fires had burned themselves out in vacuum. Vireth stared at the sight and felt something twist inside him. He had brought them here. He had ordered the jump. It had saved them from the Voltra, but it had delivered them into the one place every council species feared more than death. "Captain," Rena said. Her voice had changed. Vireth turned. She was leaning toward her console, head tilted slightly, listening through the static. Her fingers moved carefully, adjusting filters, isolating bands, clearing interference. "I have something." Terrell stiffened. "A Voltra signal." "No," Rena said. "Not Voltra." Sela crossed to her. "Council, no." The bridge fell silent again. Rena increased the volume. At first there was only static. Then a low vibration moved through the speakers. Not a signal tone. Not language. It was more like space itself, groaning under pressure. The sound deepened until the console housing began to tremble beneath Rena's hands. Terrell looked up. "What is that?" Before Rena could answer, every remaining sensor on the ship screamed. The forward display flashed white, then black, then filled with warnings. Gravitational distortion detected. Spatial compression. Unknown energy event. Sela's eyes widened. Something is folding local space. Vireth moved to the forward viewport. Beyond the glass, the black clouds had begun to move. Not drift, move. They pulled inward toward a single point, directly ahead of the scout ship. The stars behind them bent, stretching around an invisible pressure. Space rippled like the surface of dark water, disturbed by something enormous rising from below. Terrell whispered a word in Old Shirokin, a prayer. The point ahead of them collapsed into absolute black. It was not the darkness of empty space. It was deeper than that. A round, impossible absence opened in front of them, swallowing the stars behind it. Its edges twisted and folded, not spinning exactly, but turning in ways Vireth's mind struggled to follow. The blackness widened, pulling the surrounding clouds into itself. Then the clouds came back out. They surged forward from the opening like smoke from the mouth of some ancient beast, thick and dark and alive with lightning. Blue-white arcs snapped through the cloud mass, branching and reconnecting, striking nothing, and yet making every display on the bridge jump and flicker. The scout ship shook. Not from impact. From proximity. Whatever was coming through, That distortion was bending space hard enough to push against them. "Back us away," Vireth ordered. Terrell's hands flew across the controls, thrusters responding at 9%. "We don't have enough power. Try." "I am trying." The black cloud expanded, rolling toward them. Lightning crawled through it in violent veins. It looked less like an arrival, and more like a storm forcing itself through a wound in reality. Rena's voice broke. "Captain, is it a weapon?" "No," Sela said, though she sounded uncertain. "It is too structured. There is mass behind it." The cloud parted. Something emerged. At first, Vireth could not understand what he was seeing. His mind expected a warship, because anything coming from the quarantine zone had to be a warship. But the shape that pushed through the darkness was unlike any design in Council records. It was massive, not graceful, not curved, not built with the Shirokin love of balance and elegant symmetry. It was blocky, heavy, layered with thick plates of dark metal. Sections of hull overlapped one another like armor hammered into place by a species that expected the universe to hit back. Reinforced struts ran along its sides. Huge engine housings burned with a deep amber glow at the rear. Along the outer hull, rows of spherical machines clung in locked cradles, each one fitted with mechanical limbs and forward-mounted cutting lasers. To the Shirokin crew, they looked like weapons. Hundreds of them. Turrets waiting to unfold. Death eyes arranged in perfect rows. The ship kept coming, clearing the last of the black cloud with slow, impossible confidence. It was easily 15 times the size of the Starseeker. Maybe more. The scout ship's damaged sensors struggled to measure it and returned estimates that kept changing, as if the vessel was too large or too dense for the system to properly classify. Terrell leaned back from his controls, stunned. "That is not a ship," he whispered. "That is a city." Sela stared at the readings, her face gone pale beneath the blue markings on her skin. "Power output is beyond any Council transport class. Shield harmonics are active, strong. Very strong." Rena swallowed. "Weapon signatures." Sela looked at the display, then looked away. "I cannot tell what is a weapon and what is not." That frightened Vireth more than a clear answer would have. The ship held position ahead of them. Its hull lights blinked in slow patterns, amber and white against black metal. The last of the fold space clouds rolled away behind it, shrinking back into nothing until the wound in space sealed with a final ripple. Then the darkness was still again. 2 vessels drifted in the quarantine zone. One small, broken, and nearly dead. One vast, dark, and unknown. Vireth forced himself to sit in the command chair. "Rena," he said, "open a hail." She looked at him as if he had asked her to step outside without a suit. "Captain, we cannot run. We cannot fight. We cannot survive without help. And if that is the ancient enemy." Vireth looked at the massive vessel. The stories came rushing back. Deathworlders. Devourers. Beings from beyond the forbidden dark. A species so dangerous the Council had sealed away a section of the galaxy rather than risk another war. But the Voltra were outside the zone. The data was here. His people were dying. The Council needed what he carried. Vireth drew a slow breath. "Then we will speak to the ancient enemy." Rena nodded once, trembling, and activated the short-range transmitter. "This is the Shirokin scout ship Starseeker," she said, voice thin but steady. "We are damaged and adrift. Identify yourself." Static answered. Then a pulse. Then something came through the speakers. The universal translator seized the signal immediately, its processors working hard enough that Rena's console began to heat. Lines of untranslated phonetics appeared and vanished, meaning trees branched and collapsed. The system struggled with unfamiliar syntax, regional inflection, idiom, tone, and an accent so strange the translator seemed to treat it as a separate language. A voice emerged at last, low, warm, deep, completely unlike anything Vireth expected from an ancient terror. "Howdy, y'all. Need some help?" No one moved. For one long moment, the bridge of the Starseeker became perfectly still. Terrell blinked. Rena looked down at her translator as if it had betrayed her. Sela whispered, "That cannot be correct." Rena checked the output. The translator confirms greeting, informal. Inquiry regarding our need for assistance. Terrell slowly turned toward Vireth. It said howdy. "I heard it," Vireth said. The unknown ship remained motionless ahead of them, enormous and dark and bristling with what looked like enough weaponry to erase them 1,000 times over. And from that impossible vessel had come a voice that sounded almost friendly. Vireth pressed the response control. "This is Captain Vireth of the Shirokin scout ship Starseeker. We are carrying vital intelligence for the Galactic Council. Our vessel has sustained severe damage. Our engines and navigation systems are inoperable. We request assistance." There was a pause. Then the voice returned, easy and unhurried. "Well, shoot, Captain. Sounds like y'all had yourselves a rough day." Rena's translator flashed several uncertainty markers. Terrell stared at the speakers. "Is it mocking us?" "I do not think so," Sela said. The tone registers as sympathetic. The voice continued. "Name's Tex, captain of the long-haul vessel Dusty Trail. I can give y'all a lift, help patch that boat of yours, and if anybody's hurt, I've got medical systems aboard. Might take me a minute to figure out your biology, but I reckon we can manage." Vireth absorbed each part slowly. A lift, repairs, medical systems. The ancient enemy was offering aid. He looked at the enormous vessel again, at the rows of spherical machines along its hull, at the layered armor and glowing shields. "Captain Tex," Vireth said carefully, "you are willing to assist us?" "Sure am," Tex replied. "Ain't right leaving folks stranded out here. Especially not in this part of space." That phrase tightened the bridge. This part of space. He knew where they were. He belonged here. Vireth hesitated. Every instinct told him to ask the questions immediately. "What species are you? What is your world? Why do you live in the quarantine zone? Do you know what the Council believes about this region? Are you the reason no one returns?" But the data core sat behind him. Life support ticked downward. His crew needed repairs, safety, air. Curiosity could wait. Survival could not. "We need to reach the Galactic Council home system," Vireth said. "Can you transport us there?" Another pause. This one shorter, yep. Vireth waited for more. None came. Terrell leaned toward him and whispered, did he understand the distance? Vireth keyed the comm again. "Captain Tex, the Council home system is far beyond this region. Even with our fastest phase routes, the journey would take." Tex interrupted, not rudely, but with the casual confidence of someone discussing weather. "Don't worry about that, Captain. My fold drive will get you where you need to go." The bridge went silent again. Fold drive. Sela looked at the energy readings from Tex's arrival. "So that is what we witnessed." Vireth felt the old scientific part of his mind awaken despite the fear. The Council did not use fold space. Not like that. Phase travel bent a vessel along mapped gravitational corridors, delicate and dangerous, requiring careful coordinates and known lanes. But what Tex's ship had done was different. It had folded the distance itself. It had not traveled through space in any way the Council understood. It had opened a door and stepped through. Vireth forced himself back to the moment. "My crew and I accept your assistance," he said. "Good deal," Tex replied. "Now y'all sit tight. I'm gonna bring you aboard." The front of the massive ship lit up. Vireth thought at first it was charging a weapon. White light spread along seams hidden in the dark hull. Lines appeared where no lines had been. Plates unlocked with slow mechanical precision. The entire forward section of the vessel began to open. Terrell recoiled. "Captain." The bow separated into layered segments, each one pulling back and outward. The great ship's front became a vast dark mouth, illuminated from within by rows of landing lights. The opening was large enough to swallow the Starseeker whole, because that was exactly what it intended to do. Rena gripped her console. "It is going to consume us." "No," Sela said, scanning rapidly. "There is atmosphere inside. Docking field. Repair structures. It may be a bay." "Maybe?" Terrell asked. Vireth watched the open maw of the alien vessel grow larger as the dusty trail moved gently toward them. The scout ship's weak thrusters sputtered, useless against the pull of controlled tractor fields now wrapping around their damaged hull. The Starseeker began to move. Not by its own power. It drifted forward into the light. Every Shirokin on the bridge sat rigid as the massive doors swallowed the stars. The black hull passed around them. For a moment, the forward display showed nothing but darkness and metal on every side. The feeling was primal and terrible, like being eaten by a beast from the oldest stories. Then the interior lights came fully on. The docking bay was enormous. It stretched far beyond what Vireth expected, a cavern of steel, gantries, cargo platforms, suspended cranes, and repair arms. Rows of equipment lined the walls. Heavy machines moved on rails overhead. The spherical objects they had mistaken for turrets detached from their cradles and floated inward. They were not weapons, at least not primarily. They were drones. Mining drones, perhaps. Repair drones. Utility machines with cutting lasers, welding arms, clamps, scanners, and manipulator limbs. They moved around the Starseeker in coordinated patterns, surrounding it like a swarm of mechanical insects. Terrell flinched as one passed near the forward display. "Captain, hold steady," Vireth said, though he barely managed it himself. The Starseeker settled into a cradle of projected force. Not clamps, not landing struts. A shaped energy field caught the damaged scout ship and held it perfectly still. The deck beneath Vireth's feet stopped vibrating for the first time since the battle. That silence felt almost unreal. Tex's voice returned over the comm. "All right, y'all are secure. I'm gonna start with atmosphere containment and hull patching. Don't be alarmed by the drones. They look a little mean, but they're good workers." As if obeying him, the drones began. Scanners swept over the scout ship in pale sheets of light. Repair arms extended from the bay walls. Small machines attached themselves to damaged sections of hull, cutting away burned plating, sealing cracks, reinforcing weakened frames. Others moved toward the ruptured engine housing, spraying layers of fast-hardening material over the worst breaches. Inside the bridge, Sela's console came alive. "External atmosphere leak is stabilizing," she said, disbelief rising in her voice. "Hull pressure is increasing. They are sealing us." Rena looked at her own display. Short-range communications are clearing. Their systems are boosting us. Terrell watched the repair telemetry, stunned. They are mapping our entire ship. Sela's voice lowered. Not only the ship. A beam of soft green light passed through the bridge. Vireth felt it move across his skin. Every instinct in him screamed. The scan passed through his body without pain, but he felt exposed in a way he could not explain. His bones, organs, blood chemistry, neural activity, everything was seen, measured, understood. The beam crossed Terrell, then Sela, then Rena. Rena hugged herself. What was that? Sela checked the readings. Medical scan. Extremely detailed. Tex's voice came through again, gentler this time. Sorry about that, folks. Didn't mean to spook you. My systems needed a quick look, so we don't accidentally pump the wrong air mix or patch your ship with something toxic to y'all. Looks like your atmosphere needs a little more trace argon than ours and a touch less oxygen. We can handle that. Sela stared at the console. They analyzed our respiratory requirements in seconds. Vireth did not answer. His fear had not gone away. If anything, it had grown deeper, but it had changed shape. This was not the simple fear of a predator. It was the fear of standing before a civilization so advanced that its ordinary machines performed miracles as routine procedure. A simple hauler, Tex had implied. A long-haul vessel. Not a warship. Vireth could not accept that yet. Nothing this large, this powerful, this capable could be ordinary. Unless the species that built it was beyond anything the Council understood. The comm opened again. Captain Vireth, once y'all are comfortable, I can bring you and your crew aboard proper. I've got a mess hall if you're hungry, med bay if you're hurt, and quarters if you need rest. I can also start plotting a jump to that Council system of yours whenever you're ready to give me coordinates. Vireth looked at his crew. Terrell still seemed shaken, but alive. Sela was watching the medical scan data with a scientist's terror and fascination. Rena's hands had finally stopped trembling. They had escaped the Voltra. They had survived the blind jump. They had entered the forbidden dark. And there, in the place where legend said only death waited, a stranger with a cowboy drawl had opened his ship and offered them food, repairs, medicine, and passage home. Vireth pressed the comm. Captain Tex, he said slowly, we are grateful. My crew will come aboard. Glad to hear it, Tex replied. I'll meet y'all at the airlock. Then after a brief pause he added, oh, and Captain, yes. Don't worry. You're safe on my ship. The channel closed. Vireth sat back, staring through the forward display at the vast repair bay surrounding them. Safe. The word should have comforted him. Instead, it echoed strangely in his mind. Because beyond the walls of this impossible vessel lay the quarantine zone. Beyond the quarantine zone lay the Voltra. Beyond the Voltra lay a council on the edge of collapse. And inside this ship was a being from a species no one in the council had seen for thousands of years. A being who spoke like a farmer, commanded technology like a god, and smiled through the darkness as if the most forbidden region in the galaxy was nothing more than a lonely road between colonies. Vireth rose from his chair. Prepare to disembark, he said. Terrell looked at him. Captain, do you trust him? Vireth glanced toward the sealed data core, then toward the bay beyond. No, he said honestly. The others went still. Then Vireth continued. But I believe he wants to help. For now, that may have to be enough. Sela retrieved the data core from its cradle. Rena secured a portable translator. Terrell checked the emergency sidearm locker, then paused, remembering they carried no weapons worth naming. Of course they did not. They were Shirokin. They carried knowledge. Vireth led them from the bridge. The corridor outside was dim and damaged, but no longer dying. The hissing atmosphere leak had stopped. Emergency foam sealed a jagged tear near the ceiling. Through exposed panels, tiny repair drones no larger than Vireth's hand crawled over broken circuits, their little tools flashing with bright, precise sparks contained inside transparent safety bubbles. The Starseeker was being healed around them. By an alien ship. By a human named Tex. At the airlock, the 4 Shirokin stopped. Beyond the small circular window, the docking bay stretched impossibly large, full of lights, machines, and shadows. A figure waited on the other side. Vireth had expected something monstrous. A creature of legend. A Deathworlder. A Devourer. The figure was certainly large. Massive compared to a Shirokin. At least 2 feet taller than them, broad through the shoulders, heavy in the frame with the posture of someone used to physical weight and open spaces. He wore rugged work clothes, scuffed boots, and a wide-brimmed hat that looked utterly absurd and strangely dignified at the same time. His face was weathered, lined by hard work and sunlight from some unknown world. Hair shadowed his jaw. His eyes were small compared to theirs, but bright, alert, and kind in a way Vireth was not prepared for. The airlock cycled. Pressure equalized. The door opened. The human smiled. "Well now," Tex said, tipping his hat. "Y'all must be the Shirokin." No one answered immediately. Tex seemed not to mind. He looked over their small forms, then down at himself, as if suddenly realizing how large he must appear. "Sorry if I'm a bit much up close," he said. "Name's Tex. Welcome aboard the dusty trail." Vireth stepped forward with every bit of dignity he could gather. "I am Captain Vireth of the Starseeker. These are my crew, Terrell, Sela, and Rena. We thank you for your assistance." Tex's expression softened. "Happy to help, Captain." Sela held the data core close to her chest. Rena's translator hummed, working to keep up with Tex's accent. Terrell's eyes kept moving to the drones, the walls, the ceiling, the sheer size of everything. Tex noticed but did not comment. Instead, he gestured down the corridor. "Come on. Let's get y'all somewhere comfortable. My repair systems'll keep working on your ship. Might not make her pretty by supper, but she'll hold air and power. After that, we'll see what else she needs." Vireth followed him into the human vessel. The corridor was wide enough for several humans to walk side by side, which made the Shirokin feel even smaller. The walls were dark metal, practical and heavy, with exposed reinforcement ribs and utility panels marked in blocky human script. Unlike Shirokin ships, where every surface was smooth and elegant, the dusty trail felt built. Assembled. Strengthened. Improved over time. It was not beautiful in the way Vireth understood beauty. But it was honest. Every pipe, conduit, hatch, and plate seemed to say the same thing. This ship was made to survive. As they walked, machines moved overhead on tracks. Small drones passed carrying tools. A cargo lift rumbled somewhere below. The air smelled faintly of metal, ozone, engine grease, and something rich and smoky that none of the Shirokin recognized. Tex glanced back. "Anybody hurt bad?" "Minor injuries only," Vireth said. Tex frowned. "You sure? That jump looked rough, and your ship's got more holes than a target sign after Festival Day." The translator hesitated on the last phrase. Rena looked confused. Tex waved a hand. "Sorry." Means she took a beating. We are bruised, Sela said carefully. Some superficial cuts. Nothing requiring intervention. Well, med bay's open if you change your mind. My doc system already built a basic profile for y'all. Wouldn't do anything invasive without permission, but it can help with pain, clotting, shock, whatever you need. Vireth felt the unease return. Their bodies had been scanned, profiled, understood, and categorized in moments. And Tex spoke of it as a convenience. Thank you, Vireth said. We will consider it. Tex nodded, accepting the answer without pressure. Fair enough. That, more than anything, lowered Vireth's fear by a fraction. Tex did not push, did not demand, did not loom over them intentionally, though he could have. He slowed his pace so they could keep up. He avoided sudden movements. When a drone zipped too close and made Rena flinch, Tex snapped his fingers and pointed down the corridor. Give our guests some room. The drone immediately veered away. Rena stared at him. They obey gestures. Some do, Tex said. Some pretend they don't. He smiled, and for reasons Vireth could not explain, Terrell actually gave a small nervous laugh. They reached a large room that Tex called the mess hall. To the Shirokin, it looked like a communal chamber built for giants. Long tables stretched across the floor. Benches lined them. Storage units and food dispensers stood along one wall. At the far end, a human cooking station radiated warmth and unfamiliar smells. On one table, several plates had already been arranged. Tex gestured toward them. Wasn't sure what y'all eat, so I had the galley put together a spread. Fruits, greens, grains, some mineral supplements based on your scan. Nothing there ought to hurt you. Sela's eyes widened. You tested compatibility already? Yep. In the time since we entered your bay. Tex shrugged. Galley computer's pretty quick. The Shirokin approached the table cautiously. There were bright fruits in colors they had no names for. Soft green stalks. Pale roots whipped into a creamy mound. Small round vegetables glistening with moisture. A bowl of something golden and warm. Nothing moved. Nothing smelled poisonous. Then Tex walked to another plate at the far side of the table. On it was meat. Thick cuts of it, darkened at the edges, glazed with sauce, still steaming. Ribs, though the Shirokin did not know the word yet. Flesh attached to bone. The four of them froze. Tex picked one up casually. Hope y'all don't mind. I was about to eat before all this started. He bit into it. The sound was small. The effect was not. Rena's face shifted from curiosity to horror. Sela looked away so quickly, she nearly dropped the data core. Terrell's entire body went rigid. Vireth had read about predation. Of course he had. He was educated. He understood the biology of predator species within the Council. He knew 4 Council races had evolved as hunters and later became defenders. But knowing a thing in data was not the same as watching a massive, unknown being from the Forbidden Zone tear flesh from bone with his teeth and grin, with sauce on his chin. Tex chewed twice, then noticed their faces. He stopped. His eyes dropped to the rib in his hand. Then back to them. Then very slowly, he lowered it. Oh, he said softly, shoot. I'm sorry. Didn't think that through. No one spoke. Tex set the rib down and wiped his hands on a cloth. Y'all herbivores. Sela answered, voice faint. We evolved on a world without predators. Tex's expression changed completely. The easy smile faded, replaced by genuine regret. Well, now I feel lower than a snake's belly, he said. I apologize. That must have looked downright awful to you. The translator struggled. Rena blinked. A snake's belly. Means I feel bad, Tex said quickly. Real bad. I should have asked first. Vireth studied him. This creature, this Deathworlder, this human, this impossible being from the forbidden dark, looked embarrassed. Not threatening. Not amused by their fear. Embarrassed. It is unfamiliar to us, Vireth said carefully. I bet it is, Tex replied. I'll put it away. He moved the plate to a sealed warmer and shut it inside, then returned to the table without complaint. Now, he said, gentler than before, y'all try whatever looks safe. If something tastes bad, don't be polite. Just set it down. Different worlds, different tongues. The Shirokin slowly sat. The benches were too large, but Tex adjusted them with a control, lowering one side until the height suited them better. Another small act of accommodation. Another detail Vireth filed away. Sela was the first to try the food. She picked up a small red fruit, examined it with suspicion, then took the smallest possible bite. Her eyes widened. Taro leaned toward her. Poison. Sela shook her head slowly. No. What is it? Sela looked at the fruit, as if it had revealed a new law of physics. Extraordinary. Rena tried one next. Then Taro. Then finally Vireth. The flavor burst across his tongue, bright, sweet, sharp, layered in a way Shirokin food rarely was. His people's cuisine was subtle, gentle, aromatic. This was sunlight and rain and sugar and wildness all at once. For a moment, with the Voltra behind them and the quarantine zone around them, and the fate of the Council locked in a data core beside him, Captain Vireth forgot to be afraid. Tex watched them with visible relief. Strawberries, he said. Usually a safe bet. The translator rendered the word as best it could. Rena repeated it carefully. Strawberries. Tex smiled. Close enough. They ate quietly for a few minutes. The tension did not vanish, but it loosened. Machines continued repairing the Starseeker somewhere beyond the walls. The dusty trail hummed around them, steady and alive. Then Vireth looked up. Captain Tex. Tex leaned back slightly. Yes, sir. You said you can take us to the Galactic Council home system. I can. How long would such a journey take? Tex glanced toward the ceiling, as if checking a clock only he could see. Once I've got coordinates. A minute or two to plot safely. Jump itself won't take long. Taro nearly choked on a piece of fruit. Rena stared. Sela's hand tightened around the data core. Vireth felt the room shift around him. A minute or two. The Shirokin were among the most advanced scientific species in the Council, and even they could not cross such distances without planned phase lanes, relay points, and enormous energy costs. Tex spoke as though they were asking for a ride across a river. Vireth chose his words carefully. Your vessel is capable of reaching the Council home system almost instantaneously. Tex gave a small shrug. Close enough. And this is not a military ship. Tex's expression became harder to read. No, sir. Dusty Trail's a hauler. Mining support, cargo transport, long route supply. She ain't built for fighting. Vireth looked around the mess hall. He thought of the shields, the drones, the fold space storm, the repair systems, the medical scans, the vast docking bay that had swallowed his ship whole. Not built for fighting. If this was a simple hauler, what did their warships look like? The question must have shown on his face, because Tex's voice grew careful. I know you've got questions, Captain. Fair ones. but there are some things I'm not authorized to talk about. Human tech, human territory, military capability, that's above my pay grade. Human. The word landed softly. But Vireth felt it, human. He had never heard the species name before. Not in school. Not in council briefings. Not in Shirokin scientific archives. Yet the way text said it carried the weight of identity, history, and boundaries. Human. From the quarantine zone, Vireth looked down at the table. Every warning from childhood stirred again. But Tex had saved them. Tex had fed them. Tex was repairing their ship. And he could get them to the council. Whatever humans were, whatever the old stories had made of them, Vireth did not have the luxury of fear alone. The information we carry may decide whether the council survives, Vireth said. If you can deliver us, you may save billions. Tex's expression softened. Well, he said quietly, then I reckon we'd better get you there. He stood. Finish eating if you can. I'll have the bridge ready. When you're set, Captain, bring those coordinates. Vireth rose with him. The others followed. Tex gave them a respectful nod, then turned toward the corridor. As they walked behind him, Vireth glanced back once toward the sealed warmer where the meat had been put away. Then toward the fruit still sitting on the table. Then toward Tex, the towering human hauler who spoke in strange phrases, commanded impossible machines, and somehow seemed more concerned with being rude than with being feared. Vireth did not understand him, not yet. But for the first time since the Voltra destroyers appeared, he felt something other than dread. Not trust. Not exactly. But possibility. And in a dying galaxy, possibility was precious. At the end of the corridor, the doors to the human bridge opened. Vireth stopped. The room beyond was unlike anything he had ever seen. A full 360-degree holographic projection filled the chamber, displaying stars, planets, orbital paths, gravitational currents, ship routes, and data streams in layered light. The entire solar neighborhood turned slowly around them, not flat on a display, but alive in the air. Consoles rose from the floor only when needed. Touchscreens appeared beneath Tex's hands, as if the ship anticipated his intent. Planetary information scrolled along one side. Cargo routes pulsed along another. The black region of the quarantine zone shimmered behind them like a storm held inside glass. Vireth stepped inside slowly, overwhelmed. The Shirokin had built wonders. Observatory that could read the chemical breath of planets from light years away. Crystal engines that sang in mathematical harmony. Cities suspended over silver rivers. But this bridge felt different. It did not merely display information. It commanded reality. Tex walked to the center console and rested one hand on it. All right, Captain, he said. Where we headed? Vireth approached, carrying the weight of his species, his council, and every world the Voltra had threatened. He entered the coordinates of the Galactic Council's massive station, above the Council homeworld. Tex looked them over, then nodded once, got it. Vireth expected calculations, warnings, long-range alignment procedures, a discussion of approach vectors, safe emergence distance, diplomatic signaling, and border authorization. Instead, the hologram folded inward. The stars bent. The ship hummed. Tex glanced over with that same calm, impossible confidence. Y'all might want to hold on to something. Vireth gripped the nearest rail. Outside the dusty trail, space began to twist again. And the human hauler opened a door through the dark. Vireth gripped the rail beside Tex's central console with both hands. The human bridge had gone quiet. Not silent exactly, The ship was too alive for silence. It hummed beneath their feet with a steady, controlled vibration, deep and calm, as if some vast engine far below them had awakened, but had not yet decided to roar. The holographic galaxy that filled the bridge shifted around them, points of light bending inward toward the coordinates Vireth had entered. The Galactic Council home system, the heart of known civilization. The place every species of the Council looked to when the galaxy trembled. Vireth had expected techs to plot an approach along the outer system boundary. That was how any civilized ship arrived. One emerged at a safe distance, transmitted identification, waited for clearance, and followed a designated lane inward. It was not simply etiquette. It was survival. No one appeared too close to the Council station. No one risked startling defensive fleets, orbital platforms, or military patrols. Even during peacetime, the Council home system was one of the most protected places in the galaxy. And this was not peacetime. The Voltra War had turned caution into paranoia. Vireth looked toward Tex, hoping to ask whether he understood Council arrival procedure. But Tex simply stood at his console, one hand resting lightly on the control surface, his wide-brimmed hat casting a shadow across his face. "Y'all might want to hold on to something," Tex said. Terrell, Sela, and Rena immediately grabbed whatever they could. Vireth opened his mouth. "Captain Tex, standard Council protocol requires arrival at the outer." The sentence never finished. Space folded. It did not stretch like phase travel. It did not smear the stars into white threads or press the body through the sickening pull of a mapped corridor. This was something else entirely. The holographic display collapsed inward until every star became a single point of light. Then that point opened. A black sphere formed outside the forward view, perfect and depthless. Around its edges, space twisted in violent curves, folding over itself like dark cloth caught in invisible hands. The bridge lights dimmed. A low pressure settled over Vireth's bones. For one impossible moment, he felt as though the ship was not moving at all. The universe was moving around it. Black clouds erupted ahead of the dusty trail, pouring from the fold like storm vapor from a wound in reality. Lightning flashed within them, jagged and white-blue, crawling over nothing and striking empty space. The clouds did not drift naturally. They rolled outward with purpose, opening a tunnel through distance itself. Then the hauler moved. Or perhaps space moved. Vireth could not tell. The stars vanished. The bridge filled with darkness and lightning. For a heartbeat, the dusty trail existed nowhere. Then the universe snapped back. Light flooded the holographic chamber. A planet filled the display. It was enormous, blue and silver and green, wrapped in soft bands of cloud and surrounded by glittering orbital structures. The Galactic Council homeworld turned slowly beneath them, radiant in the light of its star. Around it moved the traffic of 1,000 civilizations, diplomatic carriers, defense cruisers, cargo rings, orbital elevators, station tenders, patrol wings, and distant military formations. And directly ahead, impossibly close, hung the Galactic Council station. Vireth's breath left him. It was one of the greatest works ever built by Council hands, a vast orbital citadel constructed over centuries, layered ring by ring as each new member species added its knowledge to the whole. Its central body was shaped like a many-sided crown, kilometers across, surrounded by rotating habitation rings, docking spires, shield pylons, and diplomatic towers that glowed with soft golden light. Great arcs of glass and metal curved along its surface. Solar collectors stretched like wings. Communication arrays extended from its upper towers, like forests of silver needles. Beneath the station, the Council homeworld shone in peaceful contrast, unaware for one terrible instant that history had just arrived above it. Vireth stared at the distance markers. His mind refused them. They had not emerged at the edge of the system. They had not emerged near an outer beacon. They had not even emerged at a polite orbital approach distance. Tex had placed the dusty trail almost directly in front of the Council station. Right on its doorstep. Too close. Far too close. Tex, Vireth whispered. Tex glanced over. Yeah. You brought us directly to the station. Sure did. You cannot do that. Tex looked back at the enormous station ahead, then at his console. Well, he said, I already did. Before Vireth could answer, the entire system reacted. On the station, defensive lights flared red. Shield rings powered up in cascading waves, one after another, until the entire structure shimmered inside a layered energy shell. Docking lanes shut down instantly. Civilian traffic scattered, ships breaking formation and fleeing toward emergency vectors. Patrol craft spun toward the unknown vessel, engines burning bright. Orbital weapons platforms pivoted with mechanical precision. Across the bridge display, hundreds of targeting beams locked onto the dusty trail. Rena's face went pale. They are targeting us. Tex looked mildly impressed. That was quick. That is not a compliment, Vireth said. Alarms began pulsing through the communication bands. Not inside the dusty trail, but from every Council frequency around them. Automated warnings. Military challenges. Emergency evacuation orders. Tactical commands. The station's entire defensive network had gone into full alert. To the Council, it must have looked like the end of history. An unknown vessel, larger than most of their warships, had appeared from nothing in a burst of black cloud and lightning, bypassing every outer defense, every warning beacon, every border patrol, every minefield, every shield perimeter. It had not approached. It had arrived. And it had arrived close enough that, if it were hostile, the first strike would already be too late to stop. The dusty trail hovered in front of the station, like a dark mountain of metal. From the outside, the hauler did not look like a civilian vessel. No Council officer could have known what it was. The layered hull plating looked like armor. The heavy industrial braces looked like reinforced weapon housings. The spherical mining drones along its flanks looked like turret clusters, hundreds of them arranged in rows near the rear hull. Its forward docking mouth, now closed, resembled the jaws of some ancient machine beast. The shields around it pulsed with power so dense that several Council sensors overloaded trying to read them. Its engines glowed with quiet restraint. Its mass alone made smaller patrol craft look fragile. And it had come from the quarantine zone. On the station command deck, chaos erupted. Supreme Commander Ka-Run stood at the center of the tactical floor, his clawed hands braced against the edge of the main command table. He belonged to one of the Council's predator-defender species, born on a class Roman 8 death world, where survival had sharpened both instinct and intellect. His people were large, furred, broad-shouldered, and naturally armed with claws and powerful jaws, but Ka-Run's true danger was in his mind. He had spent decades studying war, not as brutality, but as mathematics under pressure. And now every calculation in front of him ended badly. The hologram above the command table showed the unknown vessel in red. Its size estimates kept updating upward. Its energy readings exceeded safe classification. Its emergence point was impossibly close. Report, Ka-Run growled. A lieutenant at the sensor well answered, voice tight. Unknown vessel has appeared inside inner orbital defense range. No approach vector. No phase trail. No council identification. Energy readings are extreme. Voltra. No commander. Signature does not match any known Voltra design. Another officer looked up from weapons control. All orbital batteries are locked. Fleet wings are moving to intercept. Station shields at full power. Karun watched the hologram rotate. The unknown ship dwarfed the patrol craft around it. It was not the largest vessel he had ever seen, but it was easily one of the most intimidating. More troubling than its size was its arrival method. A ship that could bypass the system perimeter could bypass any perimeter. If it had hostile intent, no council world was safe. "Can we disable it?" he asked. The weapons officer hesitated. Karun turned his head slowly. "Answer." "Unknown, sir." "That is not an answer." The officer swallowed. Based on current shield readings, a coordinated strike from the station and nearby fleet elements might damage it. Might. But if those outer hull structures are weapons emplacements, it could devastate a large portion of the defense formation before we break through. Karun's eyes narrowed. A large portion of the ships in the system, not all. Not instantly. But enough. Enough to cripple the Council's heart, while the Voltra were already tearing at its edges. A second enemy at the center of the home system. That was how civilizations ended. "Open a command channel," Karun said. Before the communications officer could obey, another voice cut in. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the unknown vessel." "Source?" The officer blinked, reading the signal. "Shirokin encryption." The command deck went still. Karun stepped closer. "Put it through." The image flickered. Captain Vireth appeared above the table. He looked exhausted, bruised. Smaller than Karun, remembered Shirokin officers looking in formal briefings. Behind him, the interior of an unknown bridge glowed with impossible holographic depth. Human symbols scrolled in the background, though no one on the station could read them yet. "Supreme Commander," Vireth said, bowing his head with urgent respect. "This is Captain Vireth of the Shirokin scout ship Starseeker. Do not fire." "Repeat, do not fire." Karun's gaze hardened. "Captain Vireth, identify the vessel that has appeared beside my station." Vireth hesitated just long enough for the entire command deck to notice. "I cannot fully identify it," he said. "My ship was attacked by Voltra destroyers. We were forced into a blind phase jump and emerged inside the quarantine zone." Several officers turned sharply. "The quarantine zone." Karun's claws pressed into the command table. Vireth continued. "Our vessel was crippled. This ship found us. Its captain offered assistance. He repaired our hull, stabilized our life support, and transported us here." "From the quarantine zone," Karun said. "Yes." "What species?" Vireth looked uneasy. "I do not know." Karun's lips pulled back from his teeth, not quite a snarl but close. "Captain, you brought an unknown quarantine zone vessel directly to the Council station." Vireth straightened despite his injuries. "I brought vital intelligence that may save the Council. The unknown captain was the only reason I survived long enough to deliver it." That stopped Karun from answering immediately. "The Voltra. The planet killers. The collapsing front lines. What intelligence?" Vireth lifted a small armored data core into view. "My crew identified a subtle, irregular delay in the Voltra power cycle. A timing offset between core discharge and recharge. It may be exploitable through precision interference. If the Council can use it, we may be able to disable or disrupt their planet killers. Every officer on the command deck seemed to hold their breath. Karun stared at the data core. For weeks, reports from the front had grown worse. Colonies lost. Defense fleets broken. Evacuations failing. The Voltra's largest weapons had seemed nearly unstoppable. If the Shirokin had truly found a vulnerability, then the galaxy had just been handed a knife in the dark. But the knife had arrived in the hand of a stranger from the one place the Council feared most. Karun looked past Vireth at the unknown bridge behind him. "Where is this captain?" Vireth glanced off-screen. A moment later, Tech stepped into the transmission. The command deck fell silent again. The being was large, broad, plainly dressed, and visually unremarkable compared to the nightmares of ancient Council legend. No visible claws, no armor, no ceremonial weapon. He wore a hat, on a bridge that had just folded space across impossible distance and appeared within striking range of the Council's heart. Tex touched the brim of the hat politely. "Howdy," he said. "Name's Tex, captain of the Dusty Trail." No one on the station responded. The translator rendered the greeting, then displayed several cultural uncertainty markers. Karun stared at him. Tex continued, apparently untroubled by the rows of weapons locked onto his ship. "Apologies for popping in so close. Captain Vireth here gave me exact coordinates, and I figured he was in a hurry." Vireth closed his eyes briefly. Karun's voice dropped lower. "You bypassed the entire defense perimeter." Tex scratched his jaw. "Did I? Yes, well. Sorry about that." The apology was so casual that several officers visibly stiffened. Karun studied him. This Tex was either very foolish, very honest, or so confident in his own ship that the Council's defenses did not concern him. None of those possibilities were comforting. "You will hold position," Karun said. "You will power down all weapons systems." Tex tilted his head. "Ain't got weapons powered." The weapons officer muttered, "Then what are those hull arrays?" Tex looked off to the side, likely at his own display, then back. "Mining drones." No one believed him. "Not fully, not yet." Karun looked at the hologram again. Hundreds of spherical devices lined the vessel's hull. Each had cutting emitters, heavy manipulators, power cells, armor plating. To a military eye, every one of them looked adaptable for war. Mining drones, perhaps, or weapons with an innocent name. Vireth spoke quickly. "Supreme Commander, I know how this appears, but he did not attack us. He saved us." Karun's gaze returned to the Shirokin captain. "And if he wished to attack us now?" Vireth had no answer. That at least was honest. Tex broke the silence. "Commander, I don't want trouble. I hauled these folks here because they needed help. I'll sit still if that makes everybody feel better." Karun's ears angled slightly back, a sign among his species of restrained suspicion. "You come from the quarantine zone." Tex's easy expression shifted for the first time, not fear. "Recognition. Depends who's asking." "I am Supreme Commander Karun of the Galactic Council Defense Forces." Tex nodded slowly. "Then yeah. I reckon by your maps I do." The command deck chilled. Karun turned to the communications officer. "Send immediate summons to the Emergency Council. Full attendance. Highest security." "Yes, sir." He faced Tex again. "Captain Tex, Captain Vireth, you will remain where you are. No course changes." No energy spikes. No deployments. Tex held up both hands. Wouldn't dream of it. Vireth bowed his head. Understood, Supreme Commander. The transmission ended. For a moment, the station command deck heard only alarms. Karun stared at the red hologram of the dusty trail hanging above the table. An unknown human vessel from the quarantine zone had arrived at the Council's heart. A Shirokin captain carried possible salvation against the Voltra. And every ancient fear the Council had buried for 2,000 years had just unfolded itself at their front door. Outside the station, the dusty trail remained motionless, massive, dark, quiet. To the civilians fleeing through orbital lanes, it looked like an invading fortress. To the defense fleets forming around it, it looked like a target they might not survive engaging. To the Council leaders being pulled from their chambers and rushed toward emergency session, it looked like the return of an old nightmare. And to Captain Vireth, standing on the bridge beside Tex, it looked like the strangest hope the galaxy had ever been given. Tex glanced down at him. Think they are mad? Vireth slowly turned his head and stared up at the human. Yes, he said, very. Tex nodded thoughtfully. Fair enough. Then he looked back at the glittering council station ahead, surrounded by shields, weapons, and terrified ships. Well, he said, at least we made good time. The emergency council chamber had not been opened in nearly 80 years. It sat deep within the heart of the Galactic Council station, protected behind layers of shielding, biometric locks, gravity seals, and armed defense corridors. Most council representatives had only seen it during ceremonial tours, when guides spoke of ancient crises and old wars in hushed, respectful tones. Now its doors opened under red alert. Supreme Commander Karun entered first. He moved with the controlled power of a being born for violence, but trained for command. His species, the Zalkar, came from a class Roman 8 death world of violent storms, poisonous jungles, and hunting beasts that could tear armored vehicles apart. They were one of the Council's 4 predator-defender races, a people who had turned survival instinct into military discipline. Karun stood nearly twice the height of most Shirokin, broad-shouldered and furred, with a heavy mane along the back of his neck and clawed hands that rested near his sides like weapons waiting to be drawn. But his eyes were the most dangerous part of him. They were amber, sharp, and calculating, constantly measuring distance, posture, threat, weakness, and intent. He had commanded fleets against pirates, border raiders, rogue AI enclaves, and now the Voltra. He had watched council ships burn over colony worlds. He had ordered retreats he hated and sacrifices he would remember until death. And yet nothing in his long military life had prepared him for the dark human vessel now parked outside the station. The chamber brightened as he approached the central command dais. A vast hologram rose from the floor, forming a rotating projection of the Milky Way. Council territory glowed in layered colors, each region marked by species, trade lanes, defense corridors, and inhabited systems. Along one edge, red Voltra incursion markers crawled like spreading infection. Systems flashed where colonies had fallen. Others pulsed amber where evacuation was underway. And to the galactic west, sealed in a wide black boundary, lay the quarantine zone. 15% of the galaxy, dark, untouched, forbidden. Now, hovering above the station marker, a new symbol flashed. Unknown human vessel. Karun stared at it. Then Captain Vireth entered. The Shirokin captain looked impossibly small beneath the vaulted ceiling of the council chamber. His silvery skin was bruised in places, and one side of his uniform was scorched from the battle aboard the Starseeker. Yet he carried himself with quiet dignity. In both hands, he held the armored data core as though it were sacred. Behind him came Terrell, Sela, and Rena, exhausted but alive. And behind them came Tex. The human's presence changed the room. He wore the same rugged clothes, the same worn boots, the same wide-brimmed hat. He did not look like a diplomat. He did not look like a warrior. He looked like a man who had stepped off a dusty cargo platform after a long haul and wandered into the most important room in the galaxy by accident. That made him more unsettling, not less. Several council representatives whispered among themselves. Military aides stiffened. Guards along the chamber walls adjusted their grip on their weapons. Tex noticed. He raised one hand in a small, polite gesture. Howdy. The translator rendered the word. No one replied. Karun stepped forward. Captain Vireth, he said, voice low and controlled. You will explain everything. From the beginning. Vireth bowed his head once. Then he told them. He told them of the Voltra attacks, of council systems falling one after another, of colonies shattered before reinforcements could arrive. He described the planet killers, enormous Voltra vessels capable of overwhelming defense grids and cracking orbital shields through sustained power cycling. He spoke of how Shirokin scout vessels had been sent not to fight, but to observe, to measure, to search for something the warriors had missed. Then he lifted the data core. My crew discovered a delay, Vireth said. Not a defect. Not a structural weakness. A timing irregularity in the Voltra power cycle. During the transition between discharge and recharge, there is a fractional instability. It is buried beneath normal energy noise, but it exists. The hologram shifted as Sela connected the core to the council system. Data bloomed across the chamber. Voltra power readings appeared in layered graphs. Energy curves spiraled through the air. Simulation models showed the same tiny hesitation repeating again and again, almost too small to see unless one knew where to look. Sela stepped beside Vireth, her voice soft but steady. If a precision interference pulse is delivered at the correct interval, it may cause the Voltra core to desynchronize. Not explode. Not necessarily destroy the vessel. But it could disrupt their power chain long enough to disable shields, weapons, and propulsion. A murmur moved through the chamber. Karun's eyes narrowed. How confident are you? Enough to risk our lives returning with it, Vireth said. The chamber grew quiet. Then Vireth continued. He explained the asteroid corridor, the Voltra destroyers, the chase, the damage to the Starseeker, the blind phase jump with no coordinates and no hope of controlled arrival. And then he spoke of the quarantine zone. Even the holograms seemed to dim. We emerged inside the forbidden region, Vireth said. Our engines were dead. Life support was failing. We had no long-range communications and no means of escape. Karun's gaze shifted toward Tex. And then, Vireth looked at the human. Then Captain Tex found us. Tex shifted his weight slightly, uncomfortable with every eye in the chamber turning toward him. Wasn't much to it, Tex said. Picked up their distress signature. Saw they were busted up pretty bad. Brought M aboard and patched what I could. One of the military representatives, a horned Terran admiral, leaned forward. You brought them aboard that vessel? Yes, sir. What class of warship is it? Tex blinked. Then he gave a short laugh, not mocking, just surprised. Warship. Dusty Trail ain't a warship. The chamber went still. Karun did not move. What did you say? Tex looked from Karun to the others. She's a hauler, he said. Cargo transport. Mining support. Long route freight. I haul equipment, food stores, machinery, colony supplies, whatever needs moving. The silence that followed was heavier than alarm. Karun slowly turned toward the hologram of the massive ship outside the station. The dusty trail hovered there in dark blue projection, huge and armored-looking, surrounded by defensive markers. The station's sensors had highlighted its layered hull, its energy shielding, its drone arrays, its industrial bay, its fold space drive signature. That was a cargo hauler. Karun's claws flexed once. A simple hauling vessel had bypassed the Council's entire defensive perimeter. It had emerged within striking distance of the station. Its shields were stronger than most Council-heavy cruisers. Its hull carried hundreds of drones that could be mistaken for weapons platforms. Its repair system had stabilized a dying alien vessel in minutes. Its medical scanners had built biological profiles in seconds. If that was a civilian hauler, then the question formed in every mind at once. What did human warships look like? Karun looked back at Tex. You are telling this council that the vessel outside, the vessel that caused every defense system in this station to go to maximum alert, is not a military craft. Tex's expression sobered. That's right. It carries no military authority. No, sir. You do not speak for your species. Tex shook his head. No, sir. I'm just a cargo captain. I can speak for me, my ship, and my cargo schedule. That's about it. A few council members exchanged uneasy looks. Tex continued, more carefully now. I helped Captain Vireth because he needed help. That's all. I'm not here to start anything. I'm not here to negotiate treaties. I'm definitely not here to represent Earth. The word struck the chamber like a hidden bell. Earth. Several historians along the upper ring froze. One of them, an elderly Zorath scholar, began typing frantically across a floating archive console. Another joined him. Then a third. Red warning banners flashed in the air. Classified. Restricted archive. Access denied. Supreme military clearance required. Karun saw the warnings. So did Tex. So did Vireth. Vireth's eyes moved from the blocked files to Tex, then back again. He had not known the name Earth. He had not known humans. But the historians clearly did. Karun stepped toward the central dais and placed one clawed hand into the command interface. The hologram scanned him. Amber light moved over his paw, then up his arm. Genetic verification. Rank verification. Emergency authority confirmation. The archive unlocked. The room filled with old symbols, fragmented records, and corrupted battle maps from 2,000 years before. The quarantine zone brightened. Ancient warnings appeared in dozens of dead formats. Karun did not open them fully, not yet. This was not the moment to drown the council in ghosts. He turned instead to Tex. Captain Tex, he said, and for the first time his voice carried something other than suspicion. The council is at war. The Voltra have broken through multiple defensive regions. If Captain Vireth's data is accurate, we may have a way to resist them, but we may not have the time or capability to deploy it before more worlds fall. Tex said nothing. Karun continued. I know your species has no reason to help us. Our histories are complicated, perhaps worse than complicated. But I must ask. The Supreme Commander stood straighter. Not as a predator, not as a soldier, as a commander watching the edge of extinction approach. Can you contact your homeworld, your military command, anyone with authority? We need assistance. Tex looked down at the floor for a moment. The room waited. When he raised his head, his cowboy ease was still there, but behind it sat something firmer. I can send a message, Tex said, but I can't promise what they'll say. I don't speak for the Terran Defense Force. I don't speak for Earth. I'm just a hauler. Karun nodded once. Then send the message. Tex tapped the device on his wrist. Dusty Trail, open priority relay to Terran Defense Command. Attach local data packet. Include Captain Vireth's Voltra files, Council distress summary, and station coordinates. A calm shipboard voice answered from his comm. Priority relay prepared. Tex looked at Karun. You sure you want me to send this? Karun's jaw tightened. No, he said honestly. But I see no better path. Tex gave the smallest nod. Send it. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the council chamber's holograms flickered. A pulse left the dusty trail, jumped through fold space relay, and vanished into the black boundary of the quarantine zone. The room held its breath. 30 seconds passed. Then a minute. Then 3. Council members whispered. Military officers exchanged tense glances. Karun remained motionless, eyes fixed on the hologram of the human hauler. At 6 minutes, the communication terminal chimed. Everyone turned. A low, deep voice came through, stripped of emotion by distance and military discipline. This is Terran Defense Command. We have received your message. Stand by for incoming vessels in 3 hours. The transmission ended. No promise. No threat. No explanation. Only a time. 3 hours. The council chamber erupted. Voices rose from every tier. Some demanded full defense mobilization. Others argued for evacuation. Several representatives shouted that the humans had issued a warning, not an offer. The military species moved quickly into tactical discussion, while the scientific species demanded analysis of the transmission pathway. Karun did not join the shouting. He stared at the message timestamp. 3 hours. From Earth, wherever Earth truly was, to the Council home system. Impossible. Even Tex's hauler had crossed the distance almost instantly, but seeing one ship do the impossible was one thing. Hearing that military vessels would arrive on schedule across forbidden space, as if distance were no obstacle at all, that was something else. Karun looked at Tex. Tex only shrugged. Told you. I'm just the hauler. The next 3 hours stretched like a blade. The station remained at red alert. Civilian traffic was cleared from inner orbit. Defense fleets formed rings around the council station, though every commander knew those formations might mean little against vessels that could appear wherever they wished. The dusty trail was instructed to hold position, and Tex complied without argument. Vireth delivered the data core to council science teams under armed escort. Sela stayed with them, insisting they understand the subtlety of the Voltra timing offset. Terrell and Rena were taken to medical evaluation, though both refused anything invasive. Tex returned to his ship briefly, then joined the command channel from the Dusty Trail's bridge. Karun remained on the station command deck, watching the countdown. At 60 seconds, the room became quiet. Not ordered quiet. Fear quiet. Every officer watched the main viewport and the tactical hologram. The council station hung above the glowing homeworld. Defense ships held position. Weapons were armed, but not pointed directly at the dusty trail now. The unknown had grown larger than one vessel. 30 seconds. Karun's aide whispered, all stations report ready. Karun did not answer. 10 seconds. The space beyond the station remained empty. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exactly on the mark, space distorted. Not once. 3 times. 3 enormous regions of space twisted open in a triangular formation beyond the station. Each distortion began as a tightening of starlight, a place where the background stars bent inward and stretched around an invisible center. Then the centers collapsed into black. The fold openings grew. Vast dark spheres formed, larger than the station's docking rings. Around each, space folded in on itself, turning and writhing as though reality had become cloth caught in a storm. Then came the clouds. Black vapor poured from the openings in great rolling masses, thick as thunderheads and darker than vacuum. Lightning cracked through them in violent branching arcs, silent but blinding, illuminating the clouds from within. Energy rippled outward from the distortions, washing over the station shields in shimmering waves. Several officers flinched. One whispered, "By the stars." Karun stood perfectly still, but his fur rose along the back of his neck. The first ship emerged from the left-hand storm. It was long, angular, and armored, built in the shape of a blade. Its bow narrowed into a reinforced cutting wedge that looked capable of driving through a capital ship and splitting it open by momentum alone. Massive engines burned at the rear, bright and controlled. Along each flank, railgun batteries sat in heavy armored housings. Rows of missile doors and point defense clusters marked the hull. The second ship emerged from the right. Nearly identical, huge. Purpose-built, brutal. Then the central distortion brightened. The lead ship came through. The Spartan. It was larger than the other two by a staggering margin. If the escort vessels were blades, the Spartan was a sword forged for gods. Its bow was a massive armored prow, layered and sharpened, designed not for elegance but for impact. The forward hull carried a huge double railgun assembly mounted along the spine, its twin barrels extending like dark roads toward the station. Smaller railguns lined both sides in repeating rows. Defensive turrets tracked in smooth, predatory movements. Armor plates overlapped across its frame like the scales of some ancient war beast. Its engines glowed deep blue-white. Its shields shimmered faintly around it, not bright, not theatrical, simply present, a quiet statement that the ship expected to survive anything foolish enough to challenge it. The Spartan moved out of the fold cloud and stopped with impossible precision. No drift. No correction burn. No hesitation. It parked near the council station as easily as Tex had. Only this was no hauler. Every sensor in the command deck lit up with warnings. Power output beyond classification. Weapon mass beyond classification. Armor density beyond classification. Drive field beyond classification. Karun stared at the hologram of the Spartan and felt the final pieces settle in his mind. This was what human military engineering looked like. Not sleek. Not diplomatic. Not graceful, durable, direct. Built for destruction. Built by a species that had spent 2,000 years watching, waiting, and preparing. A lieutenant's voice broke the silence. "Sir, we are being hailed." Karun did not take his eyes off the lead ship. Source. The Spartan. The channel opened. A human appeared on the main display. He was older than Tex, with a hard face, close-cropped hair, and a scar running along one cheek. His uniform was immaculate, dark and formal, decorated with restrained military markings rather than ornamental medals. Everything about him was controlled: posture, gaze, expression, breath. When he spoke, his voice was stern, deep, and steady. This is Admiral Dan Crenshaw of the Terran Defense Fleet, commanding officer of the Spartan. We are here in response to Tex's request for diplomatic communication. No one in the command deck moved. Admiral Crenshaw's eyes shifted slightly, as if he were studying every visible face through the channel. Then he continued, "Supreme Commander Karun, I believe you and I need to speak." The docking corridor had never felt so narrow. Supreme Commander Karun stood at the far end of the sealed passage, waiting as the station's docking clamps locked onto the human shuttle. Around him, council guards held position in two disciplined rows, their armor polished, their weapons lowered but ready. None of them spoke. Even the usual hum of the station seemed quieter here, as though the great structure itself understood that something ancient was about to step across its threshold. Beyond the transparent, shielded viewport, the Spartan loomed over the station. It did not hover like the other ships. It dominated the space around it. Its blade-like prow pointed slightly away from the station, but even that slight angle felt deliberate, as if the vessel were making a show of restraint. The twin railguns mounted along its forward spine remained still, but their sheer size made every officer on the docking deck painfully aware that stillness was not the same as safety. Karun's aide stood beside him, eyes fixed on the airlock. "Commander," the aide said quietly, "do you believe they came to negotiate?" Karun did not look away from the doors. "I believe they came prepared for either outcome." The airlock cycled. Heavy seals disengaged one by one, each metallic thud echoing down the corridor. White vapor vented along the floor as pressures equalized. The inner doors parted. Admiral Dan Crenshaw stepped through first. He wore a pristine dark dress uniform, sharply fitted and perfectly kept. Every seam was straight. Every insignia sat exactly where it belonged. His boots struck the station floor with a precise, measured rhythm. He was not as large as Tex, but he carried a different kind of weight, one that came from command, discipline, and years spent making decisions that cost lives. A thin scar ran down one side of his face, cutting from near his temple across his cheek. It was old, pale against his skin, but impossible to miss. It gave him the look of a man who had survived something that should have killed him, and had learned from it. His eyes swept the corridor once. Not nervously. Professionally. Behind him came two Terran ultramarines. The council guards reacted immediately, though none raised their weapons. The ultramarines were enormous. Each wore full-body powered armor that made them look less like soldiers and more like walking assault platforms. Matte black plating covered them from helmet to boots, layered over reinforced joints and thick muscle-assist frames. Their helmets were smooth and angular, with narrow blue visors glowing like cold fire. Heavy rifles rested across their chests, held with perfect control. The weapons were large enough that a Shirokin would have needed a tripod just to aim one. Their armor carried no unnecessary decoration. No bright ceremonial markings. No banners. No flourishes. Only utility. Protection. Violence held in reserve. They moved behind Crenshaw with synchronized precision, one to his left and one to his right, each step landing in perfect time. Their presence filled the corridor. Even Karun, predator-born and battle-hardened, felt the primitive part of his mind assess them and issue a warning. Dangerous. Crenshaw stopped before the Supreme Commander. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Karun's eyes shifted to the armored Marines. "Admiral," he said, voice low, "why do you believe you need guards?" Crenshaw did not blink. Karun continued, gesturing toward the viewport where the three Terran warships hung in orbit. You have three of the largest vessels I have ever seen sitting outside my station. Ships that could devastate a large portion of the defensive forces in this system. And still, you bring armed escorts into our council chamber. Crenshaw's expression did not change. Because trust isn't given, he said. It's earned. The corridor went still. Karun studied him for a long moment. Then he gave a slow nod. Then let us see what can be earned. He turned and led the admiral into the station. The walk to the emergency council chamber was long, and every step felt watched. Station personnel stopped in corridors and stared as the humans passed. Shirokin technicians, Terran officers, crystalline Arcturan analysts, aquatic vial diplomats in hovering moisture chairs, all fell silent at the sight of Crenshaw and his ultramarines. Whispers followed them, human Terran. Quarantine enemy. Crenshaw did not react. His gaze remained forward. His posture was rigid, his stride clean and military, each movement controlled. The ultramarines followed like shadows made of armor. At last, the great doors of the emergency council chamber opened. Inside, the chamber rose like a vast amphitheater. Tier after tier of seats curved upward around a central floor. Representatives of the 15 council species filled the chamber, some physically present, others projected in luminous holographic form. Above them, enormous displays floated in layered arcs. The council home system, the Voltra warfront, the black boundary of the quarantine zone, and the 3 Terran ships now parked beside the station. At the very center of the chamber stood a large speaking podium, surrounded by a circular field of light. Karun walked to the center floor and turned to Crenshaw. With one clawed hand, he gestured toward the podium. The council will hear you. Crenshaw stepped forward. His ultramarines stopped at the base of the dais, taking positions on either side. They did not aim their rifles. They did not threaten. But their stillness was enough. Every representative in the chamber understood that these 2 soldiers were not ceremonial guards. They were there because humanity expected danger even in diplomacy. Crenshaw climbed the steps to the podium. The chamber quieted. He placed both hands on the edges of the stand and took one long, slow breath. When he looked up, his eyes were hard. "You are my enemy." The words struck the chamber like a weapon. A ripple of fear passed through the tiers. Several representatives recoiled. The vile delegations' water chairs hissed as their containment fields tightened. The Solari diplomats began speaking over one another in alarm. A Terran defense minister half rose from his seat, one hand clenched. Crenshaw did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "You have always been my enemy," he continued. "For over 2,000 years, humanity has known of the Galactic Council. We have known of your borders. We have known of your fleets. We have known of your laws, your weapons, your stations, your colonies, and your fear of us." The hologram above him shifted. The black mass of the quarantine zone expanded, its border glowing red. "You do not enter the quarantine zone," Crenshaw said. "And we do not leave it." That was the understanding. That was the line. You stayed on your side. We stayed on ours. He paused. His next words came slowly. "But do not mistake silence for ignorance." The chamber seemed to shrink around him. "We watch. We waited. We prepared. We have been watching, waiting, and preparing for over 2,000 years." The council chamber erupted. Voices rose from every level. Some shouted for the station guards. Others demanded Crenshaw be removed from the chamber. A cluster of scientific representatives began calling for immediate historical verification. The Terran admiral slammed a fist onto his railing hard enough to dent the metal. The Lumary telepathic envoys flickered with pale distress, their translucent forms pulsing in and out of focus. "He admits it," one representative shouted. "They have been preparing for war. They know our defenses. They have mapped our worlds. They brought warships to our home system. Supreme Commander, remove him." The two Ultramarines did not move. That made the panic worse. On the upper tiers, historians were frantically pulling up old files. Red classification warnings flashed across their consoles. Fragmented records appeared and vanished. Ancient battle diagrams, half-corrupted fleet reports, casualty lists from forgotten systems, translated myths from a dozen species, all of them painted the same picture in broken pieces. Humanity had been the enemy beyond the dark. And now a human admiral had confirmed that humanity had never forgotten them. Karun stepped forward, raising one clawed hand. Silence. No one obeyed at first. His voice deepened into a command roar. Silence. The chamber fell quiet in ragged pieces. Crenshaw waited until the last whisper died. Then he continued. "Good," he said. "Now you understand how we felt." The sentence confused them. Crenshaw touched a control on the podium. A Terran data packet opened, projecting human archival fragments beside the Council's own corrupted records. The images were old, grainy, scarred by time. Ships burning against unfamiliar stars. Human colonies under evacuation. Children being rushed into underground shelters. Ancient Terran defense fleets moving toward the quarantine boundary. Maps of Council space labeled with old human threat markers. Crenshaw let the images hang above him. "Our records are not perfect either," he said. 2,000 years is a long time. Governments fall. Archives burn. Languages change. Heroes become monsters. Monsters become warnings. Warnings become bedtime stories. He looked across the chamber. "Your records painted humanity as the great enemy in the dark. Ours painted the Council the same way." The representatives shifted uneasily. Crenshaw's voice remained stern, but something in it changed. It did not soften exactly, but it became heavier. Less accusation. More truth. "To us, you were the threat beyond the border. The alien alliance that nearly wiped us out. The empire that forced humanity back into its own territory. The species that would come for Earth if we ever let our guard down." He gestured toward the quarantine zone map. "So we did what frightened people do when they survive something terrible." The map changed, showing human stations, defense grids, shipyards, colonies, and patrol routes deep inside the forbidden region. "We fortified, we built. We watched the border. We trained our fleets. We taught our children not to cross the line. We remembered you as monsters, just as you remembered us." A murmur spread through the chamber, quieter this time. Crenshaw let it happen. Then he said, "But we did not invade." The words settled over them. For 2,000 years, humanity has remained inside its territory. We did not attack your colonies. We did not raid your trade routes. We did not send fleets into your systems. We did not interfere with your council. He glanced toward the hologram of the Spartan outside the station. We prepared because we believed one day you might come for us. Not because we intended to come for you. Karun's expression remained unreadable, but his eyes sharpened. Crenshaw continued. Then Captain Tex, a civilian cargo hauler, found a dying Shirokin scout ship in our territory. He did what most decent captains would do. He rendered aid. He repaired their vessel. He brought them here because they carried information that may help stop your current enemy. Several representatives looked toward Vireth, who sat with his crew on a lower tier. The Shirokin captain held himself still, but his eyes were fixed on Crenshaw with intense concentration. Crenshaw's gaze moved to him briefly. Captain Vireth did not know who we were. Tex did not know the full history of your people. They met in the dark with every reason to fear each other, and still they chose not to fire. The chamber was silent now. Crenshaw straightened. That matters. For the first time, his voice lowered. I did not come here to pretend we are friends. We are not yet. Maybe not for a long time. There is too much blood in the past, even if neither side remembers it clearly. He looked from species to species, letting the words reach each of them. But I also did not come here to restart a war built on broken records and inherited fear. The hologram shifted again. The Voltra front appeared, red and spreading. You have a war now. A real one. Not a ghost. Not a legend. Not an ancient border dispute twisted by time. The Voltra are advancing. Their planet killers are breaking your defenses. Your colonies are falling. He paused. And if they break you, they will reach us eventually. That quieted even the most fearful members. Crenshaw tapped the podium again. The Shirokin data appeared beside the Voltra map, the tiny power cycle delay highlighted in blue. Captain Vireth's data is good. Our analysts reviewed it during transit. The vulnerability is real. Difficult to exploit, but real. Vireth's eyes widened slightly. During transit, the humans had reviewed the data in the short time between receiving Tex's message and arriving at the station. Crenshaw continued. With your current weapons, you may be able to use it defensively, given time. With ours, there may be another option. The chamber stirred. Not panic this time, hope. Dangerous, fragile hope. A Solari diplomat rose slowly. Admiral Crenshaw, are you offering military assistance? Crenshaw did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked to Supreme Commander Karun. Karun understood the gesture. The human admiral would not beg to help. He would not offer himself to a room that had just called him enemy. The request had to come from the Council, from its military commander. Karun stepped into the center of the chamber. For a moment, the Predator commander and the human admiral faced one another beneath the rotating hologram of a galaxy divided by fear. Then Karun turned to the Council. You have heard him, he said. His voice carried through the chamber, firm and grim. Our enemy is at the door. The Voltra have taken our outer systems, shattered our defenses, and forced us into retreat after retreat. Captain Vireth and his crew risked everything to bring us a chance. Captain Tex, though unknown to us, delivered that chance when he could have ignored it. He looked back at Crenshaw. And now the humans stand before us. A dozen representatives began whispering again, but Karun spoke over them. I do not trust them. Crenshaw gave no reaction. Karun continued. And they do not trust us. Perhaps they are right not to. Perhaps we are right not to. But trust is not what I am asking for today. He lifted one clawed hand toward the Voltra map. I am asking whether we wish to survive. The chamber went still. Karun turned fully toward Admiral Crenshaw. His posture changed, not submissive, not defeated, but honest in a way that cost him pride. Admiral Dan Crenshaw of the Terran Defense Fleet, he said, the Galactic Council requests assistance. The words hung in the air. Not demands. Not orders. A request. Karun's voice lowered. We need help. Crenshaw studied him for a long moment. Then he gave a single, measured nod. Then let's talk about stopping the Voltra. The Emergency Council chamber remained silent after Supreme Commander Karun made the request. The words had not been spoken lightly. We need help. For a long moment, Admiral Dan Crenshaw did not answer. He stood at the central podium beneath the enormous rotating hologram of the galaxy, his scarred face set in a hard expression. Behind him, the map of Council space glowed with red Voltra incursion markers. Entire sectors flashed in warning colors. Evacuation routes blinked and vanished as the enemy advanced. The quarantine zone sat to one side of the galaxy like a black scar, and beside the Council home system, 3 Terran warships waited in orbit. The Spartan and her 2 escorts, silent, massive, patient. Crenshaw looked from one council representative to another, then finally back to Karun. We will help, he said. The chamber stirred at once. Some representatives exhaled in relief. Others stiffened as if those 3 words were more frightening than rejection. The Solari delegation leaned toward one another, whispering quickly. The crystalline Arcturans shimmered with changing internal light. The Terran military representatives remained stone-faced, but their hands clenched against the railing in front of them. Karun did not move. He had heard the promise. Now he waited for the cost. Crenshaw's voice hardened. But if humanity helps, it will be done our way. The whispering stopped. Crenshaw placed both hands on the podium. This will not be a joint command operation. This will not be a council-led military action, with Terran support elements attached. I will not submit my ships to committee approval, political delay, or battlefield votes. Several council members shifted sharply. One of the Solari representatives rose. Admiral, surely you understand that the Galactic Council cannot surrender military authority inside its own territory to an outside force. Crenshaw turned his eyes toward him. I understand exactly what I am asking. That is an impossible demand. No, Crenshaw said. It is a condition. The chamber grew colder. Crenshaw continued. The Voltra fleet is moving now. Their next target will fall soon. If we waste time coordinating across 15 governments, arguing over rules of engagement, acceptable risk thresholds, and symbolic command structures, people will die while this chamber debates procedure. A low murmur rolled across the amphitheater. Karun watched the admiral closely. There was no arrogance in Crenshaw's face. No pleasure. No hunger for authority. That, in some ways, made the demand more difficult to dismiss. The human was not asking for control because he wanted to dominate them. He was asking because he believed anything else would fail. Crenshaw looked toward the Voltra front on the hologram. My ships, my crews. My tactics. My timing. Full operational authority. We will not ask permission before maneuvering. We will not ask permission before firing. We will not wait for council confirmation once the battle begins. The Terran admiral stood so abruptly his chair scraped backward. You expect us to sit idle while foreign warships conduct combat operations in our space? Crenshaw answered without hesitation. I expect you to decide whether you want our help or not. The Terran's nostrils flared. Crenshaw's eyes did not leave him. If you accept, then you accept that I command this operation. If you refuse, my ships return to Terran space. You may fight the Voltra your way. That sentence settled heavily over them. Their way. Their way had lost colonies. Their way had broken defensive lines. Their way had watched planet killers advance from system to system. The representatives began speaking at once. The chamber divided into clusters of fear, pride, desperation, and anger. Some argued that accepting human command would be a humiliation. Others said humiliation meant nothing if their world survived. The vile delegation demanded guarantees that human ships would withdraw after the engagement. The Kale engineers wanted access to Terran shield data. The Lumary envoys warned of deep historical trauma among member species if humanity were seen to command Council forces. The Drax cybernetic delegates requested direct battlefield integration protocols, which Crenshaw refused with a single shake of his head before they even finished. Vireth sat with his crew along the lower tier, watching it all unfold. He could feel the fear in the chamber. Not just fear of the Voltra. Fear of the humans. Fear of needing the old enemy. Fear that survival might require trusting the one species every broken record and ancient warning had taught them to dread. Sela leaned close to him. "Do you think they will agree?" Vireth looked at Admiral Crenshaw, then at Supreme Commander Karun. "I think they already know they must." At the center of the chamber, Karun listened. He let the council argue. He let every species speak its fear aloud, because fear left unspoken had a way of turning into poison. But his eyes kept returning to the hologram of the next Voltra target, a colony system marked in amber, evacuation incomplete, defense fleet badly under strength. Time was bleeding away. Finally, Karun raised his clawed hand. The chamber quieted, though not peacefully. "We have heard the terms," he said. "We have heard the objections." He turned slowly, facing the representatives tier by tier. "I will not pretend this is easy. The humans were our enemy. Perhaps in some ways they still are. We do not understand them. We do not know their full strength. We do not know what wounds history left between us." His voice deepened. "But I know what the Voltra are doing now. I know the colonies that have already fallen. I know the fleets we have already lost. I know what will happen if their planet killers reach the next system." The Voltra map enlarged behind him. A civilian population count appeared above the amber target. Millions. The chamber fell still. Karun looked back to Crenshaw. "Admiral, the Council accepts your terms." Several representatives bowed their heads. Others looked away. Some stared at Crenshaw, as if they had just invited a storm into their house. Crenshaw gave one firm nod. "Then I returned to the Spartan immediately." The suddenness of it startled the room. Karun stepped forward. "Now." "Now," Crenshaw said. "Every minute we spend here is a minute the Voltra spend moving." He turned from the podium. The two Ultramarines came alive at once, falling in behind him with synchronized steps. Their armored boots struck the chamber floor with heavy, measured impacts. Karun moved after them. "Admiral." Crenshaw stopped but did not turn fully. Karun approached him at the foot of the dais. The two commanders stood face to face, beneath the rotating image of the galaxy. "I request permission to accompany you." The council chamber stirred again. Crenshaw's expression tightened. "That is not necessary." "It is to me. This will be a combat operation. I am aware. You will be aboard a Terran warship under my command. You will not interfere." Karun's eyes narrowed slightly. "I would expect nothing less after the terms you demanded." For the first time, something almost like approval crossed Crenshaw's face. Almost. "Why?" the Admiral asked. Karun glanced toward the Voltra front. "Because those are my people dying. Council citizens. Council worlds. If I am asking my forces to stand aside while you fight in our space, then I will witness what you do. I will see your tactics with my own eyes. And if my people ask me why I trusted humanity, I will answer from experience, not from a council report. Crenshaw studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Fine. You come with me. But stay behind my command line. Follow every order immediately, and do not touch anything unless someone tells you to. Karun's ears angled back slightly. I am not a child, Admiral. No, Crenshaw said. You're a foreign commander aboard my ship 5 minutes before a combat jump. That's worse. Karun held his gaze. Then, unexpectedly, he gave a low rumble that might have been amusement. Understood. They left the chamber together. The walk back to the docking corridor felt different now. The station personnel no longer stared only in fear. They stared with uncertainty, with awe, with hope they did not yet trust. The Ultramarines remained silent, rifles held across their armor. Crenshaw walked ahead with the same rigid military stride, uniform immaculate, scar catching the corridor lights. Karun followed at his side. When they reached the airlock, the Spartan's shuttle waited. From the outside, it looked like a piece chipped from the warship itself, angular, armored, and brutally functional. No graceful diplomatic curves. No polished ceremonial hull. It was a military transport designed to enter hostile space, take damage, and keep moving. Inside, the cabin was lined with restraint seats and weapon racks. The lighting was low and white. Every surface had a purpose. Karun barely had time to secure himself before the shuttle detached from the station and accelerated toward the Spartan. Through the small viewport, the council station receded behind them. Then the Spartan filled the view. Karun had seen it from the station. He had seen the holograms, the scans, the warnings. None of that prepared him for approaching it in person. The ship was colossal. Its blade-like prow stretched forward like the edge of a continent forged into a weapon. The massive double railgun mounted along the upper bow ran nearly a third of the ship's forward length. Its twin barrels housed inside layers of reinforced armor and magnetic accelerator rings. Along the sides, rows of smaller but still enormous railguns sat in recessed channels, angled for broadside fire. Between them were point defense clusters, missile cells, shield emitters, sensor blisters, and heavy armor plates stacked in overlapping layers. The hull was dark gray, almost black, broken by white identification markings and faint blue shield lines pulsing beneath the surface. It did not look elegant. It looked inevitable. The shuttle entered a ventral bay, passing through a shimmering containment field. As it landed, crews were already moving. Human personnel in combat uniforms crossed the deck with practiced speed. Machines loaded ammunition racks. Autonomous carriers hauled equipment. Marines checked armor. Technicians shouted status updates from elevated platforms. Everything was motion. Everything was controlled. Crenshaw stepped off the shuttle before the ramp fully settled. Status, he barked. A human officer fell into step beside him. All primary systems green. Escort ships ready. Fold drives synchronized. Fleet command awaiting your call. Good. Karun followed, taking in the scale of the hangar. It was larger than many Council destroyers' internal bays. The ceiling vanished into shadow above cargo cranes and suspended weapon systems. Even the humans who rushed through it seemed small beneath the machinery of their own warship. They entered a lift. It rose fast enough that Karun felt his stomach shift, despite the inertial dampeners. The doors opened onto the Spartan's command deck. Karun stopped despite himself. The bridge was vast, tiered, and brutally efficient. Stations curved around a central command platform. Holographic displays filled the forward arc, showing the Council system, the Voltra front, the station, the three Terran ships, and tactical projections in layers of hard blue light. Officers moved with quiet urgency. No one shouted unnecessarily. No one asked what to do twice. At the center stood the Admiral's command station. Crenshaw stepped onto it, and the entire bridge seemed to orient around him. "Open fleet-wide channel," he said. A communications officer answered immediately. "Fleet-wide open." Crenshaw looked toward the main display. "This is Admiral Crenshaw aboard the Spartan. Council has accepted Terran operational command for anti-Voltra engagement. Activate rapid response package. I want 5 additional ships folded to my position immediately." Karun's head turned sharply. 5 more. The communications officer replied, "Acknowledged." Relaying to Universal Defense Fleet. Karun caught the term. Universal Defense Fleet. Not Terran Defense Force. Not Earth Patrol. Universal. Before he could ask, the tactical display updated. 5 new markers appeared beyond the Council station. Space folded open again. One after another, 5 more human warships arrived in bursts of black cloud and lightning. They emerged with the same impossible precision, forming up around the Spartan and her escorts in a wide formation. 8 ships total. 8 human vessels, now hung near the heart of the Galactic Council. Karun stared at the display. 8, he said quietly. Crenshaw glanced at him. "That's what I asked for. There are thousands of Voltra ships in that fleet, yes. And multiple planet killers, yes." Karun turned fully toward him. "You believe 8 ships can stop them?" Crenshaw's eyes hardened. "Supreme Commander, you asked for our help. Your council accepted my terms. Do not confuse your lack of understanding with impossibility." Karun's claws flexed. Crenshaw stepped closer. "I said I have full military control of this operation. That includes force composition. That includes tactics. That includes when, where, and how we engage. If you question every decision because it does not fit Council doctrine, you will distract my crew at the worst possible moment." His voice dropped lower. "You are here as an observer. Remember that." The bridge grew very quiet. Karun felt every eye avoiding him. For a heartbeat, pride rose in him, old, fierce, defensive. He was Supreme Commander of the Galactic Council. He had commanded fleets before this human officer had ever stepped into Council space. But then he looked at the display. 8 Terran ships sat in perfect formation, having crossed impossible distance in moments. His own fleets were battered, scattered, and afraid. The Voltra were moving toward another colony. Pride would not save them. Karun bowed his head once. "I remember." Crenshaw held his gaze a moment longer, then turned back to the command deck. "Target update." A tactical officer brought the Voltra fleet into full projection. The enemy formation appeared in red. Thousands of ships arranged around 3 planet killers, moving toward the next Council target system. The planet killers were immense, surrounded by layers of escorts, destroyers, carriers, and heavy cruisers. Their power cycles pulsed in the simulation. And now, thanks to Vireth's data, the tiny delay appeared in blue at the heart of each cycle. Crenshaw studied it. How long before they reach firing position on the colony? 42 minutes, the tactical officer said. Evacuation status. Council reports incomplete evacuation. Millions still planetside. Crenshaw's jaw tightened. Then we meet them before they arrive. A navigation officer looked up. Fold insertion point. Crenshaw pointed directly at the center of the Voltra formation. There. Karun stared. You are jumping into the middle of their fleet. Crenshaw did not look at him. Yes. That is madness. No, Crenshaw said. It is tempo. The bridge crew continued working, as though this were entirely normal. Orders moved quickly. Synchronize fold drives. Charge shield capacitors. Load primary railgun banks. Set energy absorption channels to combat mode. Link return feed capacitors to rapid-fire cycling. Karun listened carefully, understanding pieces but not the whole. Energy absorption channels. Return feed capacitors. Rapid-fire cycling. The tactical display shifted to show the Spartans' combat systems. Crenshaw noticed his attention. Our shields absorb directed energy, he said. Not all of it. Not forever. But enough. Karun watched the diagram as incoming Voltra fire struck a Terran shield model. Instead of simply dispersing, the energy flowed through the shield lattice into storage channels along the hull. Crenshaw continued. The more energy they pour into us, the more power we can route into our railgun accelerators. It reduces charge time, increases velocity, improves sustained fire. Karun slowly understood. The Voltra relied heavily on energy weapons. The humans had built ships that fed on them. If the enemy fires on you, Karun said, your ships fire back faster. And harder, Crenshaw said. The words were plain. The implication was terrifying. On the main display, the 8 Terran warships rotated into formation. The Spartan took the center. Its 2 original escorts slid slightly behind and to either side, while the 5 newly arrived vessels formed a staggered wedge around them. Each ship shared the same brutal philosophy of design. Blade-shaped forward hulls. Reinforced prows meant to punch through debris, armor, or ships if necessary. Massive engines mounted at the rear. Railguns along the sides. Heavy forward spinal guns built for killing capital ships. They did not look like peacekeepers. They looked like answers to questions no sane civilization wanted to ask. The Spartan's prow angled toward the projected Voltra fleet. Its twin forward railguns began to charge. Blue-white light moved along magnetic accelerator rings in sequence, one after another, like lightning being disciplined into geometry. Along the flanks, smaller railgun banks rotated out from protective housings. Armor shutters opened over missile cells. Point defense systems tested their arcs. Shield emitters glowed beneath the hull plates. Across the formation, the other 7 ships did the same. 8 blades preparing to fall. Karun watched in silence. In Council doctrine, fleets spread wide to avoid encirclement. They layered shields. They traded fire at distance. They maneuvered carefully around capital ships and avoided direct insertion into enemy centers. Human doctrine, apparently, was different. The humans were not planning to approach the Voltra fleet. They were planning to appear inside it, to strike before the enemy understood what had happened, to turn the Voltra's own fire into fuel. Crenshaw stood at the center of the Spartan's bridge, hands clasped behind his back. All ships' final status. One by one, reports came in. Vigilant ready. Resolute ready. Iron Saint ready. Enterprise ready. 'Cause you know, Long Watch ready. Dauntless ready. Black Pike ready. The communications officer looked up. All ships report ready, Admiral. Crenshaw nodded. Transmit to Council Station. Terran Task Force initiating engagement. Advise all Council forces to hold position outside the combat zone until ordered otherwise. Sent. Karun looked at him. You are not asking for support. Crenshaw's eyes remained on the Voltra projection. Not yet. The bridge lights dimmed to combat levels. A deep tone sounded through the Spartan. Not an alarm. A warning. A promise. All hands, Crenshaw said over shipwide comms. Combat fold in 2 minutes. Target is Voltra main fleet. Primary objective, prevent planetary strike. Secondary objective, neutralize planet killers using Shirokin vulnerability data. Rules of engagement are active. Weapons free on confirmed Voltra targets. Across the bridge, human officers tightened restraints, checked displays, and settled into the calm focus of people who had trained for this exact nightmare. Karun moved to the observation position, behind Crenshaw's command line. A Marine silently locked a restraint frame around him. He did not object. On the main display, the Voltra fleet grew larger. Thousands of red markers. 3 massive planet killers. Millions of civilians behind them. 8 human ships before them. The fold drive began to charge. Space around the Spartan trembled. Karun felt it through the deck, a deep pressure building beneath reality. The holographic stars ahead bent inward. Around the fleet, black spheres began to form, one around each Terran vessel. Dark clouds gathered at their bows, threaded with lightning. Crenshaw's voice cut through the tension. Fleet, prepare to pull space. The phrase sent a chill through Karun. Not jump. Not travel. Pull space. The human ships did not cross distance. They dragged distance to them and tore a door through it. The countdown appeared on the main display. 10, 9, 8. Karun looked at Admiral Crenshaw. The human did not look afraid. 7, 6, 5. He looked ready. 4, 3. The 8 Terran ships aligned like blades aimed at the heart of the Voltra fleet. 2, 1. Crenshaw's voice was cold and final. Fold. Space folded. For one impossible instant, the 8 Terran warships ceased to exist in any place the Voltra could understand. Then the universe tore open in the center of their fleet. 8 black wounds appeared among thousands of Voltra vessels. They did not appear at the edge of the formation. They did not emerge outside weapons range. They did not arrive in a cautious attack pattern, or at a distance where commanders could study the enemy, adjust formation, and begin the slow dance of fleet combat. They appeared in the middle, directly in the heart of the Voltra armada. Black clouds erupted around them, rolling outward in thick, violent waves. Lightning cracked through the darkness, crawling over the fold distortions like living veins of white fire. The stars twisted. The space between ships bent and warped. For a few seconds, the center of the Voltra fleet became a storm of impossible physics. Then the clouds split apart. The Spartan came through first. Its blade-like prow punched out of the fold storm, enormous and dark, twin forward railguns already rotating into firing alignment. The other 7 Terran ships followed around it in a wedge formation, each one emerging with shields active, engines hot, and weapons charging before the last arcs of fold lightning had even faded from their hulls. On the bridge of the Spartan, Supreme Commander Karun felt the deck settle beneath his feet as reality snapped back into place. The main tactical display filled with red. Voltra ships everywhere. Above them, below them, ahead, behind. There was no empty direction. The Terran fleet had landed in a sea of enemies. For one breath, even the Voltra did nothing. Their fleet had been advancing toward the next Council colony system in disciplined formation, its 3 planet killers protected deep inside layered escort groups. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, and drone ships surrounded them in dense defensive shells. They had expected scattered Council resistance, perhaps a desperate last stand, perhaps another evacuation fleet to crush. They had not expected 8 unknown warships to tear reality open in the center of their formation. The Voltra hesitated. Admiral Crenshaw did not fire. The Spartan opened up. The twin forward railguns discharged with a force that made the entire ship tremble. Massive slugs of dense alloy accelerated down the magnetic rails at a fraction of light speed, leaving blue-white trails of ionized particles behind them. The shots crossed the distance faster than thought and punched through the nearest Voltra heavy cruiser from bow to stern. The cruiser did not explode immediately. For a fraction of a second, it simply remained there, as if unaware it was dead. Then its spine split. Armor peeled outward. Internal pressure ruptured along the wound. Red plasma burst from the exit hole in a long, violent plume, and the ship broke into 3 burning sections. Along the Spartan's flanks, railgun batteries fired in sequence. 1, 2, 3. Then dozens. Then hundreds. The other 7 Terran ships joined them. The formation became a storm of kinetic fire. Railgun slugs tore through Voltra destroyers, punched through shield grids, shattered engine blocks, and ripped open command sections. AI-guided missiles launched from armored cells along the hulls, streaking into the chaos in coordinated swarms. They did not fly in straight lines. They adjusted, split, recombined, and hunted. Some dove around debris. Some used destroyed Voltra ships as cover. Others waited half a second for enemy shields to flare, then struck the weakened side. The Voltra fleet finally reacted. Every ship nearby turned. The entire central formation seemed to twist inward as thousands of weapons redirected toward the 8 Terran vessels. Energy cannons lit across Voltra hulls. Plasma lances charged. Particle beams focused. Missile pods opened. Fighter bays disgorged clouds of small attack craft, each one darting toward the Terran wedge like insects swarming a flame. Karun gripped the restraint rail behind Crenshaw's command line. "They are all targeting us," he said. Crenshaw did not look back. That was the idea. The Voltra fired. Space vanished in light. Energy beams struck the Spartan's shields from every direction. Blue, red, violet, and white fire hammered against the protective barrier, turning the ship into the center of a newborn star. The escort vessels disappeared beneath their own storms of incoming fire. To Karun, it seemed impossible that anything could survive under such concentrated force. Then he saw the shield displays. The Terran shields were not merely resisting. They were drinking. Incoming energy spread across the shield lattice, not as uncontrolled heat, but as captured force. The light flowed backward through invisible channels, racing along the hull in bright lines. Energy storage banks filled. Magnetic accelerator rings surged. Railgun charge cycles accelerated. The more the Voltra fired, the faster the Terran guns answered. A weapons officer called out from below. "Return feed capacitors at 40%. Crenshaw said, "Begin rapid-fire cycle." The Spartan sighed, railguns changed rhythm. What had been controlled bursts became a continuous thunder of kinetic death. The great ship's flank lit in repeating waves as batteries fired, recharged, and fired again. Each shot was fed by the very energy the Voltra poured into its shields. Karun watched the tactical display in disbelief. The Voltra were strengthening their enemy. Every beam they fired came back as metal. Every strike against Terran shields became another railgun slug, another missile launch, another enemy ship torn apart by impossible velocity. Primary target, Crenshaw said. The central display locked onto the nearest planet killer. It was massive beyond reason, a dark crescent-shaped fortress surrounded by destroyers and shield escorts. Its main weapon ran along its belly, a power array designed to focus enough destructive force to crack planetary defense grids and sterilize continents. Shirokin data appeared beside it. The tiny delay, the subtle timing flaw, the heartbeat in the monster. Synchronize main cannons, Crenshaw ordered. All ships. Target Planet Killer 1. Fire on my mark. The 8 Terran ships adjusted. Even in the chaos, they moved as one. The formation rotated slightly, bringing all forward spinal railguns to bear. Their bows pointed toward the planet killer like execution blades. The Voltra sensed the danger. Escorts moved to block. Destroyers rushed into the line of fire. Cruisers poured energy into the Terran shields. Fighter wings swarmed toward the human ships. Crenshaw waited. Karun could not understand why. On the display, the Voltra power cycle pulsed. Discharge, recharge. Discharge, recharge. Then the tiny lag appeared. Marked, Crenshaw said. 8 main cannons fired. The Spartans' twin forward railguns led the volley, launching 2 enormous kinetic penetrators that crossed the battlefield in a blur of blue-white light. The 7 other Terran ships fired almost simultaneously, their spinal cannons releasing heavy slugs timed not merely to impact the planet killer, but to strike during the precise instability window Vireth's crew had found. The first Voltra escort ship moved into the path. It vanished. Not exploded, vanished. The Terran rounds punched through it so cleanly and so violently that the ship became a spray of molten armor and atmosphere. The remaining shots hit the planet killer's forward shield. For an instant the shield held. Then the Shirokin timing exploit took effect. The interference pulse rode the kinetic strike like a hidden blade. The planet killer's shield grid flickered at the exact wrong fraction of a second. Its recharge cycle stumbled. Energy collapsed unevenly across its hull. The Spartans' rounds punched through. They struck deep. One round tore into the planet killer's main power spine. Another slammed through its lower weapon array. The remaining shots from the task force hit in a staggered pattern, each one guided by the timing data, each one striking where the Voltra systems were least able to compensate. The planet killer's core did not detonate. It failed. Lights across the massive vessel flickered out in strips. Its weapon array went dark. Its engine stuttered. Then secondary explosions rippled along its length as overloaded conduits tore themselves apart from the inside. On the tactical display, Planet Killer 1 shifted from red to black. Destroyed. For the first time, Karun heard the Terran bridge react. Not cheers. Not celebration. Just rapid confirmation. Primary target disabled. Core dead. Planet Killer 1 neutralized. Crenshaw said, shift to second target. The Voltra fleet descended into fury. Their fighters came in thick clouds now, thousands of small craft breaking from carriers and cruisers. They were fast, agile, and numerous, darting between wreckage and firing in swarms. Council fleets normally countered fighter screens with their own fighters, interceptors, and point defense drones. The humans launched none. No fighter bays opened. No pilots raced into the void. No small craft moved to meet the Voltra swarm. Instead, the Terran ships deployed space claymores. From the sides of the escort vessels, armored pods shot outward into the paths of incoming fighter wings. They drifted for less than a second before detonating in perfect sequence. They did not explode like bombs. They opened. Each pod fired thousands of car-sized tungsten blocks into space in a directional blast, a wall of hyper-accelerated metal spreading across the fighter approach lanes. The chunks were unguided after release because they did not need guidance. At those speeds and in those patterns, space itself became a killing field. The first Voltra fighter wave flew into the tungsten storm. Hundreds of craft were shredded instantly. Some were cut in half. Others disappeared into expanding clouds of debris. Wings broke away. Engines ruptured. Cockpits shattered. Entire attack formations ceased to exist before they came within proper firing range. A second wave tried to climb over the kill zone. Point defense railguns tracked them automatically. Thousands of smaller slugs fired from Terran hull mounts, each shot calculated by shipboard combat intelligence. The airless battlefield became a geometry of death: angles, velocities, predictive paths, and metal. Still no human fighters launched. Karun stared at the display. "Why no pilots?" he asked before he could stop himself. Crenshaw answered without taking his eyes off the battle. "Against swarm numbers like this, fighters are coffins. We let machines handle the close work." Another claymore spread fired from the Resolute, catching a Voltra bomber group as it broke through a debris shadow. The entire group vanished in a glittering spray of tungsten impacts. The Voltra tried to adapt. They pulled back their fighters and began launching missiles in mass volleys. Thousands of warheads streaked toward the Terran formation from every angle. The human ships responded with layered defense. Point defense guns opened first, cutting down the front wave. Then AI-guided interceptor missiles launched, each one hunting multiple targets before burning out. Then the claymores fired again, not at fighters this time, but into missile corridors, filling approach paths with dense clouds of metal fragments. The few missiles that reached the shields burst harmlessly against energy barriers, already glowing with absorbed power. The Terran railguns only fired faster. "Second Planet Killer is maneuvering behind its escort shell," the tactical officer reported. Crenshaw said, "Black Pike Hard Mercy cut the shell open." Two Terran ships broke slightly from formation. Their blade-like prows turned toward a cluster of Voltra cruisers, protecting the Second Planet Killer. The Voltra ships poured fire into them, desperate to push them back. The more they fired, the brighter the Terran shield channels became. Black Pike's side railguns entered rapid-fire mode first. The ship raked the escort line with sustained kinetic volleys, each slug smashing through shields weakened by absorbed return energy. Hard Mercy launched a spread of AI-guided missiles that curved around the cruisers and struck their engine sections from behind. The escort shell opened. The Spartan and the remaining ships lined up. Again, the Shirokin timing data pulsed across the display. "Discharge, recharge, lag." "Fire," Crenshaw said. 7 spinal cannons fired first. Then the Spartan's twin forward guns thundered. The Second Planet Killer attempted to rotate its heaviest armor toward the incoming volley. It was too slow. The round struck along its upper power lattice, hitting precisely during the recharge delay. Its shield collapsed in uneven sections. 3 penetrators punched into the core regulation system. 2 tore apart the main weapon conduit. Another exited through the far side, dragging fire and debris into space behind it. The Planet Killer broke open from within. A chain reaction rolled across its crescent hull. Internal decks flashed white. The main weapon array cracked down the center. Sections of the ship separated, drifting apart like pieces of a dead moon. Planet Killer 2 went dark. The Voltra formation began to lose shape. What had been a disciplined armada became a storm of panicked movement. Ships collided trying to reposition. Destroyers cut across cruiser firing lines. Fighter formations scattered. Carriers began pulling back from the Terran wedge, no longer eager to feed their strike craft into tungsten clouds and machine-guided railguns. But the third Planet Killer remained, and it was charging. Enemy primary weapon activation detected, the tactical officer said. Third Planet Killer is attempting to fire through the fleet. Karun looked up sharply. At what? The answer appeared on the display. The Council colony system. Even from this distance, even through chaos, the Voltra were trying to complete their mission. Crenshaw's expression hardened. Dauntless, vigilant, intercept line of fire. 2 Terran escorts accelerated forward. They put themselves directly between the third Planet Killer and its target vector. Karun's breath caught. They will be hit. Yes, Crenshaw said. The third Planet Killer fired. A beam of catastrophic energy lanced across the battlefield, wider than many Council ships, bright enough to overwhelm the display filters. It struck the Dauntless and Vigilant head-on. Their shields flared white. For one terrible moment, Karun thought they were gone. Then the white light began to bend. The Terran shields drank deeper than before. Energy overflowed into return feed channels. Warning indicators flashed across both ships, but they held position. Their hulls burned with captured power, shield veins blazing like lightning trapped under armor. On the Spartan's bridge, alarms sounded. Dauntless shields at 70%. Vigilant at 68%. Return feed overload risk. Crenshaw's voice remained cold. Route access to main guns. All ships target 3. Full volley, no delay. The third Planet Killer's power cycle had just discharged. Recharge began. The tiny Voltra lag appeared. For one perfect instant, the enemy's greatest weapon was vulnerable: fire. The human fleet answered with everything. The Dauntless and Vigilant, still glowing from absorbed Planet Killer energy, fired first. Their main cannons launched rounds accelerated by the enemy's own catastrophic beam. The shots struck with monstrous force, punching through the Planet Killer's outer shields before the recharge cycle could stabilize. Then the Spartan fired. Its twin railguns discharged so powerfully that Karun felt the vibration through the restraint frame. The slugs crossed the battlefield and hit the breach opened by the first shots. The rest of the fleet followed. Kinetic penetrators slammed into the Planet Killer's core structure, one after another, each impact timed by the Shirokin data, each one worsening the instability. The Voltra ship tried to compensate. Its systems adapted. Its shield grid shifted frequencies, too late. The final round from the Spartan's port spinal gun punched through the central regulation chamber. The third Planet Killer died violently. Its core collapsed inward, then burst outward in a ring of blue-white fire. The main weapon array shattered. Armor plates kilometers long peeled away from the hull. The shockwave rolled across nearby Voltra escorts, smashing smaller ships against one another and ripping fighters apart in the blast. Planet Killer 3 was gone. The tactical display changed. No active Planet Killers remained. For a few seconds, the Voltra continued firing. Then something passed through their fleet that even the humans could read: fear. Voltra ships began breaking formation. At first, only the outer escorts turned. Then carriers. Then cruisers. Destroyers fired blind volleys while reversing course. Fighter swarms scattered, abandoning attack runs and racing back toward their surviving carriers. Command ships pulled away from the Terran wedge, putting wreckage and burning hulls between themselves and the 8 human vessels. Crenshaw watched. "Are they retreating?" Karun asked. "Yes." "Will you pursue?" Crenshaw's eyes remained on the collapsing enemy formation. "Not beyond objective range. We came to stop the strike and kill the planet killers, not chase frightened ships into prepared space." The Voltra fleet fled. Thousands of ships had entered the battle. Far fewer left in order. They retreated toward Voltra-controlled space, leaving behind wreckage, burning carriers, dead cruisers, shattered destroyers, and the broken remains of 3 planet killers drifting in the dark. The 8 Terran ships held formation at the center of the devastation. Their shields still glowed with stolen energy. Their railguns steamed with residual heat. Their hulls bore scars, but none were broken. On the Spartan's bridge, reports came in with terrifying calm. Planet killers neutralized. Enemy fleet withdrawing. Primary objective complete. Council colony no longer under immediate threat. Karun stood behind the command line, staring at the battlefield. He had commanded wars. He had seen victories. He had seen fleets clash for days over control of a single moon. But he had never seen anything like this. 8 ships had folded into the center of an armada, absorbed its fury, turned that fury into ammunition, killed 3 planet killers, erased entire fighter swarms without launching a single pilot, and forced the Voltra fleet to retreat. 8 ships. Admiral Crenshaw exhaled once, slow and controlled. Then he turned slightly toward Karun. "Supreme Commander." Karun looked at him. Crenshaw's face was stern, unreadable. "Tell your council the colony is safe." Karun looked back at the display, at the broken Voltra fleet fleeing into the dark. For the first time since the war began, he did not see only defeat ahead. He saw the impossible. He saw humanity. The first battle had broken the Voltra's advance. The next battles broke their certainty. After the destruction of the 3 planet killers, Admiral Dan Crenshaw did not give the Voltra time to recover. He did not allow them to regroup, reform, or build another defensive wall around their remaining command ships. The 8 Terran vessels moved with relentless precision, folding from one battlefield to the next, striking before the Voltra could understand where the blow would fall. The Spartan led every assault. Where the Voltra gathered, humanity appeared. Where the Voltra attempted to fortify, Terran railguns tore through their defenses. Where the Voltra tried to counterattack, their own energy weapons fed the shields of the human ships and came back as accelerated tungsten, steel, and fire. Council fleets followed at a distance, watching in disbelief as the war that had nearly destroyed them began to reverse in days. Systems once marked as lost were retaken. Voltra supply routes collapsed. Their carriers burned in the dark. Their cruisers scattered. Their destroyers fled rather than face the human wedge head-on. The humans did not fight like the Council. They did not spread into elegant formations or trade careful volleys across wide distances. They folded directly into the most dangerous part of the battlefield, absorbed the enemy's opening fury, and answered with overwhelming force. Again and again, the Voltra tried to adapt. Again and again, it was not enough. At the Battle of Nammer's Gate, the Voltra massed nearly 600 ships around a fortified refueling station. The Spartan and her task force folded inside the station's defensive perimeter and destroyed the command cruisers before the Voltra could finish turning their guns. At the Ash Belt, Voltra fighter swarms attempted to overwhelm the Terran ships by sheer numbers. The humans launched no fighters. They answered with space claymores, point defense railguns, and AI-guided missile webs that turned the swarm into drifting metal. At Halron's moon, the Voltra hid a reserve fleet behind a gas giant, waiting to ambush pursuing Council ships. Crenshaw detected the trap, folded behind the ambushers, and broke them in less than 17 minutes. By the end of the sixth engagement, Voltra command signals had changed. They were no longer coordinating an invasion. They were trying to survive. Supreme Commander Karun remained aboard the Spartan through it all. He stood behind the Admiral's command line, watching battle after battle unfold with the same stunned silence. At first, he had watched with suspicion, then with caution, then with the grim respect of one military commander recognizing another. The humans were terrifying, but they were disciplined. They struck military targets. They ignored civilian stations. They accepted surrender from disabled ships when those ships powered down and transmitted compliance. They did not chase escape pods. They did not bombard worlds. They did not punish colonies for the choices of commanders. They were not gentle, but they were controlled. That mattered. Finally, the Terran task force reached the edge of Voltra home space. The Voltra had gathered everything they had left. Their remaining warships, reserve carriers, defense platforms, orbital weapons, and the half-finished skeletons of new planet killers still under construction above their industrial moons. The Voltra home system glowed red on the Spartans' tactical display. Thousands of enemy ships remained, but they were cornered now. The 8 Terran vessels folded in at the edge of the system, not inside the fleet this time, but directly between the Voltra defensive line and the open stars. Crenshaw let them see the formation. The Spartan at the center. 7 warships around her. No reinforcements. No Council fleet beside them. Only 8 ships. And yet the Voltra did not advance. For nearly 9 minutes, both sides waited. Then the Voltra transmitted. The message came through in formal surrender structure, translated first by Terran systems, then by Council relays. Voltra High Command submits cessation of hostilities. We request surrender terms. The bridge of the Spartan remained quiet. Crenshaw read the message once. Then he turned to Karun. "This is your war," he said. "What do you want to do?" Karun stared at the red fleet markers. He thought of the colonies lost, the ships destroyed, the dead, the millions who would never return home. His claws flexed once, hard enough that the tip scraped against his own palm. The old part of him wanted to end it. The commander in him knew better. "If they surrender formally," Karun said, "we accept. Their command staff will stand trial under Council law. Their planet killer program will be dismantled. Their fleets will be disarmed. But we accept." Crenshaw nodded once. "Transmit it." The terms went out. The Voltra accepted. And just like that, the war ended. Not with celebration. Not at first. Only silence. A silence too large to understand. The Terran task force remained in position until the Voltra began powering down their weapons. Council fleets arrived hours later to secure prisoners, oversee disarmament, and confirm the destruction of the planet killer shipyards. Only then did the Spartan return to the Council home system. When the 8 human ships folded back near the Galactic Council station, the alarms did not sound this time. Ships still gave them wide space. Weapons still tracked them quietly. But no one fired. Inside the emergency council chamber, chaos had taken a different form. Every display showed battle footage. Holograms replayed the first engagement again and again. The 8 Terran ships folding into the heart of the Voltra fleet, the shields absorbing enemy fire, the railguns accelerating, the planet killers dying one by one. Analysts from all 15 species filled the chamber tiers, arguing over physics, tactics, ethics, and the terrifying implications of what they had witnessed. Military representatives watched with open awe. Scientists watched with hunger. Diplomats watched with worry. The Shirokin watched with quiet pride, because without Vireth's data, none of it would have been possible. Requests began arriving before Admiral Crenshaw had even returned to the chamber. First from the Solari delegation, then the Arcturans, then the Kale, then the full Emergency Council office. Formal petitions, preliminary proposals, security arrangements, alliance inquiries, and finally, the question that had been waiting since the moment the Spartan appeared: would humanity join the Galactic Council? Crenshaw listened to the requests without expression. When the council finally quieted, he stood at the central podium once more. "I cannot make that decision," he said. The chamber murmured in confusion. Crenshaw continued, "I command ships. I do not make treaties for Earth. I do not speak for the Terran civilian government, and I do not decide humanity's place in your council." A Solari diplomat rose. "Then who must we speak to?" "Diplomats," Crenshaw said. "Properly informed ones." Karun stood nearby, still wearing the fatigue of days of battle. "How soon can they arrive?" Crenshaw looked at him. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether you would like to come with me to Earth." The chamber quieted again. Karun's ears shifted back. "To Earth?" "Yes," Crenshaw said. "You asked for help. You fought beside us as an observer. You saw our ships but not our world. If your council is going to negotiate with humanity, someone should understand who we are beyond our weapons." The offer surprised Karun more than he allowed his face to show. He had expected delay, suspicion, layers of security, perhaps a diplomatic vessel arriving under escort. Not an invitation. Crenshaw added, "You can meet the diplomatic delegation there. See the planet. See enough to know we are more than old stories." Karun studied him. Then he nodded. "I will go." The journey to Earth took less time than Karun needed to prepare himself for it. The Spartan folded space, and the council home system vanished behind them. The transition still unsettled him. The black clouds, the lightning, the terrible sensation that space itself was being pulled aside by force rather than crossed by motion. Then Earth appeared, blue, white, green, alive. Karun stood at the Spartan's forward observation deck and stared at the human homeworld. It was not the nightmare planet of Council legend. It was not a burning fortress or poisoned war sphere. It was a world of oceans and cloud banks, forests and deserts, storms and cities glittering on the night side. A death world, yes. He could see that in the data scrolling beside the view. Violent weather systems, high gravity compared to several council worlds, predatory biospheres, tectonic activity, dangerous fauna, unstable climates. But it was also beautiful. Around Earth, however, was the truth of humanity's vigilance. Shipyards filled orbit. Massive construction frames surrounded half-built warships. Defense platforms hung in layered shells around the planet and moon. Orbital habitats spun slowly above the atmosphere. Patrol craft moved along invisible lanes. Dry docks cradled vessels the size of council capitals. Supply stations, repair yards, weapons platforms, and sensor arrays formed a defensive web so dense that Karun understood at once why humanity had never feared isolation. They had not been hiding helplessly in the dark. They had been building, preparing, watching. A tactical aide displayed the numbers. Karun read them twice, then a third time. 3,000, he said. Crenshaw stood beside him, hands clasped behind his back. In the Sol system alone. Karun slowly turned to him. 3,000 ships like the Spartan. Not all like the Spartan, Crenshaw said. Different classes, different purposes. But yes, roughly 3,000 capital-grade defense vessels assigned to this system. Karun looked back at the shipyards. For the first time in his life, the Supreme Commander of the Galactic Council felt very small. If humanity had chosen invasion, he began. Crenshaw finished the thought without pride. You would have known. Karun did not answer. There was nothing to say. They descended no farther than Orbital Diplomatic Command, a vast station above Earth where the Terran delegation had already assembled. Unlike the warships, the diplomatic station was bright, open, and filled with signs of civilian life. Humans of many nations and cultures moved through its halls. Some wore formal suits. Others wore military uniforms. Some were scholars, translators, historians, legal specialists, and cultural advisors. They did not look like conquerors. They looked nervous, curious, determined. The lead Terran diplomat was Ambassador Elena Marquez, a calm woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed very little. She greeted Karun not as a defeated enemy, nor as a curiosity, but as an equal representative of another civilization. Supreme Commander, she said, it is an honor. Karun bowed his head. The honor is mine, Ambassador. Crenshaw stood aside during the introductions. For the first time since Karun had met him, the Admiral seemed almost relieved to not be the one speaking. Within hours, the Spartan returned to the Council station with the Terran diplomatic delegation aboard. This time, when humanity entered the Council chamber, it did not do so behind a warning. Ambassador Marquez took the podium. For days, negotiations filled the chamber. They were not easy. The Council wanted guarantees. Humanity wanted sovereignty. The old war had to be investigated by joint historians. The quarantine boundary had to be redefined. Trade lanes had to be discussed. Military cooperation needed strict terms. Technology sharing was limited, carefully controlled, and in some areas forbidden entirely. But the foundation had changed. Humanity had saved a Council colony. Humanity had ended the Voltra offensive. And humanity had shown restraint when it could have shown domination. At last, the agreement was drafted. Earth and its colonies would become the 16th member civilization of the Galactic Council. Humanity would take a military position within the Council structure, not as rulers, not as enforcers over the others, but as one of the defender species responsible for galactic security. Terran fleets would remain under human command, but joint operations could be authorized under agreed emergency protocols. The quarantine zone would no longer be a wall of silence. It would become a monitored border of contact. A scar, perhaps, but one that had begun to heal. When the final vote passed, the Council chamber did not erupt into celebration. Not exactly. There was too much history for that. Too much fear still lingering in the walls. But there was applause. Hesitant at first, then stronger. Vireth stood with his crew, eyes bright with emotion. Terrell smiled openly. Sela held the original data core that had started everything. Rena wiped at her eyes, pretending she was adjusting her translator. Tex, who had been invited back for the ceremony and looked deeply uncomfortable in formal surroundings, tipped his hat from the back of the chamber. "Not bad for delivery run," he muttered. No one translated it properly, but Vireth smiled anyway. Later, long after the vote, after the speeches, after the diplomats withdrew into smaller rooms to begin the endless labor of turning promises into law, Admiral Crenshaw stood alone on the station's observation deck. The stars stretched beyond the glass. The council homeworld turned below, peaceful now. Karun entered quietly. For a while, neither commander spoke. They stood side by side, looking out at the same darkness their peoples had stared across for 2,000 years. Finally, Karun said, "I have not thanked you properly." Crenshaw glanced at him. "You accepted the surrender. You saved lives by doing that. You saved them first." The admiral said nothing. Karun looked out toward the stars. "For most of my life, humans were a warning buried in restricted archives. A shadow at the edge of the map. Something to fear should it ever return." Crenshaw's expression remained stern, but his voice was quieter than usual. "We had the same stories about you. That is a tragedy." "Yes," Crenshaw said, "it is." The silence returned, softer this time. Karun clasped his hands behind his back, in a gesture he had unconsciously picked up from the human admiral. "Do you believe this will work?" he asked. Crenshaw looked out into the black. "I don't know." Karun turned toward him. Crenshaw continued, "Trust isn't given. I meant that. It's earned. One battle does not erase 2,000 years. One treaty does not make old fear disappear." "No," Karun said. "It does not. But it's a start." The stars reflected in the glass between them. Crenshaw took a slow breath. "We spent 2,000 years as enemies," he said, "staring at each other across millions of light years of darkness, watching, waiting, preparing for the worst." Karun listened. The admiral's voice softened, just slightly. "Maybe it's time we spend the next 1,000 years doing something better." Karun looked back to the stars. Then slowly he nodded. "Friends, perhaps." Crenshaw gave the faintest hint of a smile. "Perhaps." Behind them, the station lights glowed warm and steady. Ahead of them, the galaxy waited. Not healed, not safe, not yet, but open.